Hello, chat. How are you today? It's me, Deeg. Wrel's going to join us in just a minute. But before he does, and I'm just realizing that my chat actually doesn't work on this scene. Fix that later. Anyway, before he does, I want to have a quick word with y'all. The Deeg Podcast and my channel in general is a welcoming place. Y'all know this. I have welcomed in every single perspective on PlanetSide and life over the last couple years as people have come through here. In order to be welcoming, we need to be open to what everyone has done and is and what they have to say. And if we have something to say that's a little hurtful, we need to be mindful about that. So I just want to charge everyone here with the task of not making me figure out how to moderate my YouTube chat, because I want to trust y'all as my friends in my community. Be cool. And we're going to have a lot of fun. And we'll be with you in just a sec. And we're here with Wrel. It's me, Deeg. I'm so excited I can't even say my name first. This is the Deeg Podcast. I'm interviewing Wrel, the lead designer of PlanetSide 2 at Rogue Planet Games. How the hell are you, Wrel?
I'm pretty okay.
Pretty okay. That's a little bit of a charged
okay.
statement.
Right in the line.
Should we unpack that? Are you really doing okay, man?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. No, I'm happy to be here. I mean, we spoke last year. When was it? Was it about this
It was
time?
like summer of 2020, man. It was right at the start of the pandemic, if you can believe that.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. In some ways, it seems like forever ago, and in some ways, it seems like it was just yesterday. Anyway, I'm thrilled to have you, man. And it's especially cool to have you on because PlanetSide 2 just saw one of its coolest things to ever happen, like since I've been paying attention to it, which is, I want to start off with this, man. I remember those streams, the stream you did all those years ago talking about Osher. Do you remember this? The first version of Osher you showed to the community?
Yeah, I think that was 2018.
2018. Okay, now all those years ago. A while ago, anyway. And you fucking did it, man. Y'all got Osher into the game. The first major, massive continent to be added to PlanetSide since Awesome, which was truly an eternity ago. How does that feel, man, to finally get that in?
Yeah, that was a challenge. Because not only did we deliver like a massive continent, which is just I think healthy for the game overall to have more play spaces to play in, right? Like Hassan was back in 2014, so we're looking like 7+ years ago. And so new continent and then totally new mechanics too. And the mechanics portion of it was like that was the crazy bit where can we pull it off? Like, is it gonna meet like our quality bar, and is it going to be fun for the players? Is it going to add more depth to the experience? And I think so. Like it totally opens us up to new styles of gameplay in the future. And yeah, and then you see some of that in the roadmap later this year. Hopefully we can expand upon that to some degree, and I know we'll get into that later. But
we'll talk more about the roadmap.
No, it's
talk more about the roadmap. I just want to gush about Osher for a minute first.
Yeah, let's do that.
I don't know if you realize how much fun some people are having with this place, man.
So
do you realize?
So it's exciting to me because the release of Osher, the update itself. I mean, there's bugs and whatever because there's happens to be and totally new mechanics and everything else, but like the sheer scope of that update and the excitement of the players, the main source of like feedback that I got, or the common thread was, this makes me feel like PlanetSide 2 back in 2012. And like to me, that's like nailed it. you know,
Dude, yes.
and
Dude,
I'm
yes.
sure the luster will wear off. Just being like a
Yeah.
realist, right? And I'm sure it has for certain people. And of course, there's a very different style. I think that was or a style of gameplay.
Mhm.
It was
Mhm.
kind of cultivated over the years. Where we've kind of gotten away from it. Games gotten faster. Games gotten more infantry centric and that sort of thing. But we, the map style uh, is, I think, sort of like best of both worlds, where we
Mm.
can create, use the current style of gameplay to create the old style of excitement that people have, kind of had there from the start. So,
Mhm. I resonate with that. That it there's a I posted a meme on my Twitter that, like, about people who were enjoying Osher and people who weren't, and the picture I used for the people who were enjoying it was that snap of the critic from Ratatouille. Have you seen that movie?
a long time ago.
I can briefly sketch it out because it's worth understanding. Uh, this is a movie where the protagonist is a young chef and the mouse who actually tells him what to cook. It's like a cartoony movie, so the mouse is, whatever. Okay. You don't need to know about the mouse. But the important thing is that the main nemesis in this movie is this awful critic. This awful critic who goes around assassinating restaurants for following the standards, for not meeting expectations, for not doing what they're supposed to be doing as stewards of the fine art of cuisine. And the chef comes up with this dish that he thinks is just going to kill, or the mouse, more appropriately. And it's ratatouille, which is this French dish that's just kind of I don't know a lot about it, French cuisine, but what happens is the chef manages to make a dish that is so effective that it takes this critic like back to a moment in their childhood. Like he tastes the dish and it's like, oh, you call back to that mode of being from when you were that stuck in your memory so keenly because it was so strong. And I may be overstating it a little bit. Okay, I get enthusiastic, but
Mhm.
that sense of returning really does, for me, exist with Osher and with a lot of people I've talked to.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
congrats.
I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah, the team has done an amazing job. Lots of lots of work. Definitely challenges in the way that we were able to get past, and
Mhm.
a lot of, yeah, no, it's ambitious, and we like being ambitious here on on Planetside too, just in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the mood like in, like, the virtual office when you finally got Osher out? Was it relief?
Hmm.
Okay, we're moving on to the next thing, or was it more like, "They like it? Thank God?" What was the feeling?
That's an interesting question that I don't know that I have a great answer for. I think that
Okay.
the sort of the work from home situation
Mm.
has
It's
created
so
a little
weird.
bit of a it's made things a little bit more difficult to connect. Like, we have our
Mhm.
chats and we go back and forth and that sort of thing, but there is a different type of excitement when you're in person compared to online. So,
It's harder to share that.
um,
Yeah,
I think so.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, in other words, hard to say. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to share
I mean,
the
obviously
infectious.
excited. They love sing. So let me chime
Uh-huh.
in before this gets pulled out of context. The most the most valuable thing for me to share to the team is what you all are saying.
Okay.
Like in, on Reddit or on whatever social media platform, Twitter or Facebook or what have you. Like that's the easiest way for us to make a connection to what's like going on. Um, whereas yeah, I think that's the easiest.
So,
Yeah.
it's really important for people who are having a good time to say something about it.
Oh yeah. And so to key in on that, despite okay, so there's always like a level of negativity on Reddit and
Of
just
course.
kind of in general, right?
Mhm.
And that's to
Mhm.
be expected. We understand that, um, and that when I to so we take that as a truth, and then when we see people who are excited, despite that,
Mhm.
because it takes guts, I would say, to like speak up against the crowd. Like when Reddit has a very uh, like group think sort of like mentality going on, and that's just
Hmm.
to some degree, it's like there's some internet culture in there that's just a thing. But yeah, so when somebody says an opinion that's contrary, they tend to be like tamped down and made to like it doesn't matter really how relevant that opinion is. or like how realistic it is. So when you do have an opinion that tends to go against the grain of what others were
Sure.
saying, whether
Sure.
it's just like the like trepidation or like uh, this sort of thing can never work, or for somebody to speak against that, there's it does so much more, or it speaks to me so much more
Yeah, it takes
that
more.
maybe I'm a little bit off.
If you go to the
Uh,
Reddit and you see people saying Osher sucks or another
right.
disappointment or
Mhm.
a Rel is bad meme, which
Right.
that's where those things get. That's where those things go. That's what the
Of
subreddit's
course.
for. I mean, other stuff
Yep.
too, but it's also for that. Um, then and you see one guy who's like, "This is amazing," and yeah, there is like a more significant moment of inertia to overcome in order to be able to
Mhm.
provide feedback like that when you have that kind of ground level negativity that's there. And we all
Yep.
acknowledge that there's ground level negativity in this community, and it's just too old. Like we've all been here for too long. 10 years is
Mhm.
a long time.
Oh yeah.
So that kind of thing just happens. Um
For Osher in particular, it's the men or the release uh, of the continent. So something that I don't see happen a lot is people who went into it with a like, oh, this will never work, just a
mhm.
standard pessimism, but then changing their perspective, like,
Mm,
oh, this is actually way more interesting than I thought it would be, or more compelling than I thought it would be. Like
mhm.
that sort of switch hardly ever happens,
Right.
regardless of what you put out.
Where
Usually,
you
it's
kind of
just like,
prejudge it. You know what to expect.
mhm,
You go in like, "This is the way I'm gonna feel," and then something
right.
different happens.
Yeah, because people tend to find what they're like. They want to reaffirm their beliefs, right? They don't want to change their opinions, that
It's
sort of thing.
natural.
So
That's
I saw
survival. Gotta find our people.
right. I saw a lot of that though. Just people being like, "Wow." Uh, so like the critic in Ratatouille, right? Where
Yes.
just something clicks that they didn't expect, uh,
Mhm.
and so yeah, I'm
And it's
very
that much
excited
more
about the
powerful.
release
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely felt that way. Although I will admit I'm an internal optimist, so I went into it expecting something cool to happen. I didn't know what that cool thing was gonna be, to be honest with you. The tridents looked pretty interesting. Some of the bases looked pretty cool, like Pommel Gardens is really weird and cool. Century Mining Operations seems like a good place to frag out. Mirror Bay seems, I mean, it seems like Osher's version of The Crown, but fights that just never end. and
Yeah.
but what I didn't expect was to find myself zerging down lanes and having the best fucking time in PlanetSide I've had in
Mm.
a long time. Did not expect that. And I use
Hmm.
the word zerging with love. Okay, it's a term that's used pejoratively, but there is something about the ground truth of PlanetSide about capturing a base, loading up your vehicles, driving to the next base, and the thing that Osher is doing for me that is so surprising to me is putting me in situations where I feel like I want to be in a vehicle. I don't remember if you pointed this out before the interview or after we started because we talked for a few minutes ahead of time, but I've always played infantry in PlanetSide 2. I'm Mr. Redeploy, Mr. Joint Combat, teleport between my, 24 to 48 player fights, get a nice comfortable rhythm going. When the fight dies, I'm a little annoyed, you know. I'm not happy that we won. But this gave me something enough uh different enough and surprising enough to like suddenly get construction on my character to be like, what is this construction all about, really? I
Mm.
should explore this, figure it out. The other day on stream, I made a construction base that wasn't destroyed. I mean, no one attacked it either, but it wasn't destroyed, and that was so exciting. I just got to build it. Um, and I found myself like learning and sorting out how to drive a harasser, which is like I don't know, gotta be like the most fun ground vehicle on PlanetSide. I love harassers. But that's a whole part of the game I never cared to understand. I didn't even know the names of like the vehicle weapons. So when I see like the meatballs coming out of the harassers, I didn't know what that was. Oh, it's a halberd. Okay. I know what that is now because I'm actually engaging with that part of the game.
Mm.
And it's been really cool seeing these kind of field fights that happen between the more traditional style bases. These field fights with the construction and these player made bases which I didn't know if a fight at a player-made base could ever actually be very fun. I wondered if you and the team felt how confident did you feel that players would find these construction bases on Osher fun? I know you've experimented around with it before on like Essamir and some of these other places.
Yeah, so the experimentation is kind of the key because
Oh,
I'll say that we pushed more on Esamir with some of the bases. Tried like when we blew up the Shattered Warp Gate, there's that extra lane that's up there now that has no spawn points and it's just construction.
yeah, yeah.
And now there's stuff to like kind of build around too, but it's a little bit out of the way, so it's not really interfering with the main game.
Hmm.
I will say that those sorts of bases had varying levels of success.
Right.
Like the one of the biggest factors that contributes to, well, here I'm not going to get off topic, for the construction based stuff, it was kind of like a little bit of a risky bet. I feel like I still
Okay.
think that there's too many construction
A
bases on
little bit of a
Osher.
roll of the
Like
dice. Oh, okay.
yeah. So originally, actually, the thought was like, oh, okay, we're gonna have a lot of construction bases and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But it's something, it just doesn't feel quite right because they have to be in the right place. Like
Mm,
that matters. Distance between bases matters.
right.
The sort of hitting a harder dev made base and then having a transitional base in between,
Hmm.
like that sort of thing matters too. And when I say that there's too many construction bases on Osher, like we're probably going to go and address the bases most near the warp gates and make those so they're
Mm,
not construction bases. Like the
yeah,
southwestern
sure.
warp gate has just too much going on.
Yeah, it becomes a
Um,
bit. I got stuck there a couple times, so I'm sympathetic
right,
with that.
right. And there's just certain aspects of dev made bases versus the more fluid like construction bases that like sometimes you want players to kind of like power through certain areas. So like
Okay.
the capture times are intentionally low. The bases are intentionally easier to capture.
Mm.
They're not all fortresses. And having that sort of like constant, it's just not the same thing the entire time. Is
The
also an important
variety
part of,
and
right, variety
experiences
is
as you're going
it's
through.
fun. Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. So some of those lessons we learned. Some of those lessons I feel like we know and then weren't quite able to achieve
Mm,
with Osher mostly due to time constraints.
sure.
So like we'd love to go back and add more and make some changes and just make the map better overall. But for the most part, like a lot of like the lattices were very intentionally put together.
Mhm.
You can argue that there's more flexibility needed or less flexibility needed, but
Mm.
this is one of the few continents when you think about it that actually gets fights at the warp gate.
Right. I
Like,
noticed
and
that.
that is something that, so when you think about, oh, there's less bases on Osher, but you're fighting at all of them, right? So
Yeah.
opposed to like, you never fight up at
It's one of the
Benson's
tragedies of some of
construction.
these
Is
other
that a,
continents. Like, is it
exactly?
Fort Liberty? Is that really cool infantry base on
Hmm.
Hassan that's close to Warpgate,
Yep.
so you never actually fight there? Like,
Right.
I
Yeah,
think
there's
that's what
stuff
it
like
is.
that that
And
happens all the time.
some of these, like, what's the transitional alert state called, where you just have the lanes on the outside?
Yeah, like the mini meltdowns
Yeah,
or the unstable warp gates
yeah,
uh,
yeah. But
for
it's
prior
cool
to
to
the
fight at
continent
all the
starting up.
different bases.
Hmm.
That is fodder for a lot of people who especially know these interior bases so well. Your TI alloys, your crowns, your series hydroponics. Like, how many thousands of times can it be fun to go to those places? Especially if you feel like
Right.
you have no other good options.
Yeah. So some of the design of Osher was to avoid like that problem. And
Hmm.
now maybe there's a little bit too much fighting like right outside the flotilla, but that's something that we could be resolved, or
Yeah.
that we can resolve rather.
Okay.
Yeah, so I feel like there's still plenty of there's lessons that were taken from the earlier continents and then integrated, but there's also plenty of experimentation that has been done that we can learn from in this
Hmm.
constant state of learning and just trying new stuff is what I feel like is one of the main things that has given Planetside 2 its longevity. If it were, well, yeah, maybe that's a whole different
Sounds like
sort of
you're
thing.
ready to
But
get philosophical on us. We can
uh,
save that part for later.
well, it's even functional. Just
Okay.
if you stay stagnant, then I'm not sure that you can continue to make the same progress, like, or
Mm. What
that
kind of
we've made.
progress?
Just like getting to the 10th year of PlanetSide 2. I
Right.
think a lot of that is founded in the ambition of, each year that we've had prior.
Hmm.
And even on, the six-man team back in 2019,
Right.
prior, I still
During
feel
the
like we
dark
were
days.
trying to. No, well, dark days, but I still feel like we're constantly trying new stuff.
Yeah.
Like NSO as a faction
Mm.
was implemented on that very small team.
Right.
And while it, didn't receive a phase two for a couple of years,
Hmm.
it's still it's a catalyst for something that we can, then build upon later.
Right.
Yeah.
There's clearly a
Yeah.
soul of ambition in the idea of saying, well, fourth factioning happens when the community uses
Mm,
that term or talking about people who hop around factions to find the fun fight. Why
yeah.
not make it real? That's that's saying we believe in something bigger and better and we're going to try it. I think it's beautiful, man.
Mm,
I think it's
right.
beautiful. And I love Osher. And one of the first things I heard from from people in the community when Osher was just hitting live is critiquing the lattice overall lattice structure and how it tend to put people on the outsides of the map. So it was really good to hear you say, "Oh, well, we were conscious of a need to want people to fight it more than just the interior bases, and how a more traditional lattice structure tends to produce that outcome." Um, I like it. I think it's cool, and um, I have found myself more consistently surprised by Osher than pretty much anything else that's come into the game since since you and I last talked back in 2020.
Mm,
So,
cool. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
massive kudos from me. I'm always sad when Osher is not open when I get there, when I log in at night.
Mm. I think so. That's actually just a smaller thing that we learned from too,
Uh-huh.
where Esamir was like, we did the campaign, and then Esamir's not unlocked. What the heck? And then we're like, okay, well, we'll just unlock, do
Mhm.
this auto unlock thing, and then it's just going to be auto unlocking for quite some time. And then people were burnt out. It's just Esamir the entire time. Um, so doing the first weekend, to get the initial hype and people in and everybody playing,
Yeah.
I was actually very concerned that people would get sick of it just in that first weekend,
Mm.
because when we have such a hardcore community, and they can
Yeah.
play for 5-hour sessions or whatever, and if it's all Osher,
Sure.
or all one continent in general, that's a big ask,
Mhm.
just in the scheme of things.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that we hit that first weekend, and then we kind of reeled it back, and now it's at a good
That
place where
felt
people
like
are still
that felt
excited
pretty right.
to go to Osher.
Like, you
Mm,
gave the early adopters who are there on launch day the chance to bang through the continent as fast as they want to, and they wanna get
yeah.
through it fast, and got back to a more regular cadence before they got sick of it. I think it worked. One of the I was talking to Kamikaze78 last week, on the podcast, and, one of the analogies we kinda came up with on the fly was like that of a restaurant, and you can kind of see each of the continents as like a different kind of cuisine. Um, and within the continent, there are different bases, there are different dishes. Ooh, this metaphor kind of works anyway. And sometimes you show up to the restaurant, and if they're never serving the kind of cuisine, it's like can get kind of frustrating. The kind of cuisine that is for you that you like the best. Maybe you're a Hassan guy, and whenever Hassan's not open, you're like, maybe I'll try something else. So that's an interesting pain point. It actually made me kind of think about what would planet side look like if every single server had 4 or 5 continents open, if there were that many people. How amazing would that look like? Is that a
So I
fantasy
was
you have?
well, my goal is to increase populations, right?
Yeah, we
That's
talked about that. Yeah.
that would be the ideal, in any case. And I think your outcome, or like your end result, because I watched that too.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
was lurking while you were interviewing Kamikaze,
Lurking realm. Love
and
it.
the result was like, well, if we had more people, all the restaurants would be open, basically. And
Yeah.
we don't. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
I think that that would certainly be the ideal, and I'd love to, man. I'd love to even have just like the multi continent alerts back again. People just doing large, like massive orchestrated uh, battles across multiple
Yeah.
continents. But I think for Osher, just knowing that that necessarily wasn't going to be the case. One of the things we tried to do, and you can argue whether or not we achieved it,
Mm-hmm.
but was to have like a little bit of something for everybody.
Hmm.
So, construction is there is a there is a portion of the community who really enjoys construction,
Mm-hmm.
and no other continent really is capable
Showcases
of
it.
like.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's something that people could feel like is impactful, and even people who maybe don't have an interest in construction because of just how or like at the fringes it is, now gets an
Hmm.
opportunity to kind of
Like with
like embrace
me,
that.
that happened to me, 100%.
Right, for sure. Infantry players in particular, there are some good bases on Osher that are like they're cut off from air to ground. They're
Hmm.
they're just or so like Sentry mining operation, just as an example,
Yes.
is one where it's strictly indoors and that sort of thing. And there's just a lot of good infantry focused combat spaces in general for those types of players. I think less so maybe than the sort of like combined arms element, but and then also we have just lots of space for vehicles. You see vehicles all the time. Some of it
Yes.
is, I feel like, due to the fact that we've kind of like the islands are kind of small. Like there isn't
Hmm.
massive places where you can kind of go to avoid vehicles. Yet the bases are oftentimes close enough to incentivize like the foot zerging, which to
Hmm.
me feels like the most. I think that's when Planetside is at its most
It's the
Planetside
back of the
feeling.
box. That's what
Is
the game is, at
Yeah,
the back of the
exactly. Yeah,
box.
you're
That's
running
what it is.
across, and there's explosions and
You
stuff like
see
that. Like, I still
planes
get
going
excited about
off
that.
and
Right.
explosions and like a tank is
Yeah.
zooming over a rock and yeah.
And I feel like creating that sort of combined arm experience with little sections that are for each individual type of player has hopefully created like a continent that is just versatile.
Mhm.
Is my hope, at least, to where
Mm.
even if you're a hardcore infantry player, you can still see Osher and say like, okay, I like fighting in the tridents, and then
Mhm.
go to a trident and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Uh, yeah, at least that was the goal from the outset, and I'm sure it leans more some ways than others, but
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, I think development of continents moving forward would be more like, I mean, were we to do that, would
Mhm.
be more oriented towards trying to hit all of those little pockets of the community instead
Mm.
of
It's making more
a certain style of
specialized
play.
experiences, being like,
Yeah.
this continent is really for the Mag Rider drivers, or this continent is really, or I mean, this is kind of what this is with the water
Well, no, the
mechanics.
opposite of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't want a continent that's just for vehicles. Don't want a continent that's just for infantry. I want there to
Okay.
be, yeah, small
You want to
little
make sure
pockets where you can have your
each
fill.
is a little bit for everything, a little bit for everyone.
Right. And I
Everyone's got their
think that
moment to
we
shine.
right. That's the
Mm.
goal, I think,
Okay.
for a well constructed continent.
Okay.
And I don't know, if that's really hit on anything or any of the current continents, but was trying to move that direction for Osher.
Sure.
And I think that if there's any changes to be made in the future, they should probably go sort of that direction.
Okay.
Yeah, just give a little
That
bit of
sounds really
something
hard.
to everybody.
Can I be honest? That
It's
sounds
Yeah.
really hard.
Oh, absolutely.
How hard was
So,
it to make this, to design this continent?
um, it was a long process. I'll say that the designers that we had working on this, actually everybody except for me was very new to terrain editor
Mhm.
and or to our like terrain editing tools. So
Mhm.
there's like you can actually see how some of the bases are set up are just a little bit different in their like approach and
Hmm.
yeah, even like cleanliness and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Uh, Try to we had conversations about
Every
just the
designer has a
normal like
little
design
stamp.
principles for. Right. Yeah. So there's definitely some of the varieties like due to that. Some people took to it better than others. And I think personally, just on the like development team, we have areas that we can improve on because of that. But even so, like I think they did a phenomenal job. Like
Hmm.
it's a lot of ground to cover, and you don't really realize that until you're actually there placing all the bushes and placing all the rocks and finding out where all the holes are between the rocks. So yeah, it's way
Speaking
more
of
trouble than you think.
speaking of the
Yeah.
holes in the rocks, I had this. I had a fight in on a show that surprised the crap out of me the other day. Um, First kind of fight I've ever had like this in Planetside, where there's a base and I can't remember what it's called. I think it's in the southeasterly part of the continent where it's a construction base, so there's no spawn room, and the point is inside of a hollow cave.
Remnant
And
Cove. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, okay. and you can build construction inside of it. And what was happening was uh, Vanu, I play purple, had a silo inside the base, and they were constantly throwing up blast shields to block off the doors. And you would have these fights where we were holding them off with small arms fire, like NC maxes and heavies all trying to push in at once. And then the blast wall would go up, and it would come down in like a few seconds because of the hail of fire. So you would see these
Mm.
periods of like almost like a real battle. Oh god, I feel so. I feel weird saying that. But where the wall would go up and everyone would like run around and revive everybody, and then the wall would come down and everyone would go back to their positions. It
Yeah,
was it was cool, man.
that's legit. Yeah, no, I was playing playing the other day, and honestly, I really like the water mechanics when you're in a vehicle. Personally, being able to escape. So like I was flying around in Galaxy, and just like anytime I'm taking a bunch of damage, just
The
like
air
go
vehicles
into the
feel so
water,
cool
and
underwater.
they,
I feel
they
like they
yeah
belong
they
there. It's weird. I didn't expect it.
hmm yeah. I think they're in a pretty okay spot overall, and I think just the water
Oh,
mechanics in general, being able to use them as like soft cover to avoid taking
okay.
damage is a really fun aspect
Mm.
uh, that's been introduced.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Look, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who have very strong opinions about like whether air
Mm,
vehicles belong underwater, whether it's healthy to, you know, break line of sight with water with how readily available it is here. It's a very different
mm,
dynamic when you're dealing with air vehicles here compared to any other continent for that reason. I'm just saying, like for me, on a visceral, kind of like brainstem level, that when I took a scythe under the water, I was surprised at how much it felt like it handled just like an underwater vehicle should handle, just with
mm,
the native controls and what y'all have done with the water. How hard was it
nice.
make to water the water mechanics in general? Is that a big lift?
Oh, there. Yeah.
Uh, we'll be right back, folks.
Oh no, it's
Oh no, it put you in
the
AFK, didn't it?
AFK. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I'll
All right,
turn
this
that
is gonna
off.
be a thing.
That was me. That was me. I can. Why does it think you're AFK?
Yeah, just chilling.
Oh, jeez. I'm sorry, man. I'll fix that. Anyway, we're talking about the
Okay,
water mechanics. How much of a lift
right.
were the water mechanics?
Yeah, so there was definitely a lot of unknowns when it came to just the. Oh man, it is really hard to describe the amount of gotchas, maybe. I don't know the right word
Mm-hmm.
to describe it. Just the hurdles that were in the way
Mm.
to figure out how to make that work, because it's all sorts of stuff you don't think about. So like, for example, when you go underwater, you need to like your the way that your handle or your character is handled is obviously very different, and
Mm-hmm.
then also the way that remote clients, so people who aren't you, who are looking at you,
Mm-hmm.
the information that they receive needs to be set up in a certain way, so
Mm-hmm.
that the simulations are accurate. And then
Yeah.
so when for example, just one of the bugs with turret gunners being able to fire underwater,
Mm-hmm.
or there's like a bug where you're like, oh, okay, well, if you have a vehicle and then you switch to the gunner seat and let somebody else drive it, you can
Mm.
just fire your weapon underwater. Like
Cool.
that sort of stuff is all due to just the weird the interactions that we have when it comes to the server and the client, and
Yeah, there are a lot of
who
like
owns the
little
vehicle. And
holes to be like, is this ready? Is this ready? Is this ready? Is this
mhm,
waterproof? Is this waterproof? You know.
right, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff like that. And then when it came
Mm.
to the audio, just needing to be different, like that was a whole there was a lot of tech that went into that,
Mm.
to make it work. And yeah, and like when you hear like the audio dropout bugs and that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
which was a big issue on the first two play tests of Osher.
I remember.
Just
Yeah.
audio being totally silent, or not being able to hear much. We just having to figure out, oh, what could be causing this. um well, like there's a bunch of different angles to approach this problem from.
Mm.
And yeah, so tried some stuff, and luckily turned out well. Just there's just so much stuff that you wouldn't expect, even like particle effects. Okay, well, if a bullet enters the water, then it needs to then change to use a different trail after it hits the water. And that was like a whole thing that needed to be set up. The One of the team members who did our particle effects, by my estimation, made more particle effects over the last in 2021 than many games would receive at launch. Just that's my estimation. I could totally be wrong, but between
Oh no.
you're talking about the NSO, so their entire arsenal,
Yep.
new, muzzle effects, bullet case ejections, and just the projectiles and that sort of thing.
Big North.
And then some of the one-off weapons, like the Scorpion, all had new particle effects, and of course all the vehicles, with the Dervish and the Chimera, new vehicle effects. And same thing for audio in many respects. It was just so much. And then toward the end of the year, all the water mechanics on the top of it. So it's a lot. Like, team put in work. I'm very
Price of ambition.
Yeah, they're so good. I love my team.
Yeah. I feel proud to be a PlanetSide player in 2022. I don't know if there are a lot of other gamers out there who feel the same way I do, but it's just coming from me. Like, I consider PlanetSide kind of like one of my home games. I try not to be too much of a mono gamer these days. It's a thing I have to resist. Get out there, try new things. I played a single player game, Outer Wilds, over the holidays. That was lovely. Fantastic experience. Highly recommended. But I always want to come back to my kind of live services games with the big communities where I get to bounce off of people and see the world change. Have all these weird interactions that in some way mirror the wider world and the way we operate in it. I find that so intoxicating. And it is so cool to be able to look at like a home game and be like, look at this cool stuff that's going on. So that when you tell someone that you play PlanetSide, or a coworker, let's say, like, for example, I just started a new job and it's a startup, so there's plenty of gamers. What games do you play? Oh, I play PlanetSide. Oh, let me look this up. Oh, they have these fleet carriers. That looks cool. Oh wow, there's an underwater mechanic. That looks pretty fun. Which is a totally different story than the same kind of conversation happening, say, like in 2018. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's so much. There's so much
Because
that
of
goes
you
on
and all
behind
the hard
scenes.
work of the team, man. I'm trying to give you a compliment.
I can't do that. I don't. No. I've had all of.
Come on, like a chat. We can let Rel take a compliment,
sorry.
right? Are we going to allow that? Is it okay if Rel feels complimented for a second? Can we allow this?
The team is great. They've
Yeah.
done a great job.
Yes, Rel and the team that he
Stop it.
for. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know, look, you're going to see all kinds of messaging from everyone, but I've heard from a lot of people who maybe feel like their voice doesn't belong in the daily PlanetSide, social media scroll. And I think there's, especially with Osher, it feels like there's something special happening. So I just want to be sure that you heard that.
Word.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Water mechanics. So, anything else you want to say about water?
It's wet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought when I was playing Osher is that it was a little bit of a shame that the water mechanics weren't pushed a little harder. I thought to myself, oh, there's this cool new thing, and there's underwater weapons, but like, why aren't there really any underwater objectives? Why isn't the game drawing me to fight underwater, to be underwater a little bit more? I'm guessing it was because you weren't wanting to push it too far. But then I saw in the roadmap that y'all just put out a couple days ago for 2022 that there's more on the horizon, more stuff coming. Naval vehicles. Something a lot of people in the community have fantasized about for years.
Yeah. So whenever you commit, so new continent, new water mechanics. If you also had to do all the fighting underwater, you don't know if players are going to like it. Like, obviously, players were, as far as sentiment was concerned, chomping at the bit about wanting to fight under or water and that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's another like X amount of months of
Mhm.
development to get it right, and we
Mhm.
don't know if you actually like are gonna be excited about that. I think with what we've seen so far, it's kind of it's a little bit further justification for like, okay, yeah, we can spend some time on this, and just even answering the or like asking the question, okay, if we were to spend some time on this, how much longer would it take us to develop? Is something that needed to take place kind of either during or like the actual execution of Osher or after. I mean, it did happen during the execution, but after we got some sort of validation from the community that this is
Sure.
something that they wanted, and you don't know until the rubber meets the road. So
Mhm.
like now that it's kind of like out there, like we still don't have water on a bunch of other continents, right? It's just like there's a
Mhm.
little bit on Esamir, there's a little bit of the edges of stuff.
A little bit.
So outside of that, you don't also want to commit a whole bunch of time to a singular continent that players are playing 1/5 of the time,
Mhm.
uh, unless it's either gonna not gonna be as difficult as you expect, or not gonna take as long, or you kind of know where the boundary box is. Like if there was
Sure.
a lot of unknowns at the start, and we were just like, oh yeah, no, we're gonna commit to doing water mechanics. It's going to be awesome, and then we hit all the same roadblocks that we hit with Osher. It would have been a much bigger ask. Would have probably been
Sure.
much further delayed, and the balance that we need to strike is like, how much can you offer to still get people excited, to still give them something that feels like they've got a substantial amount of value and something that they can kind of like learn over time,
Mhm.
uh, and compared to like what you could do. Amazing, maybe phrasing that a little bit poorly, but it's just like at the end of the day, it's risk reward,
Yeah.
or just return on investment even for the amount
Sure.
of time spent. And you want to
Another.
try to reduce.
Sorry.
Yeah, like we obviously what we're doing is ambitious regardless. So any way that we can kind of just create some surety, is that a word? It's a word, right?
Why not?
Sure. Okay. Assurance that we are doing the right thing is it's important to uh, yeah, before moving ahead.
I think what you're talking about is here's a term that I hear thrown around a lot working out at a startup is MVP, minimum viable product, which
Sure.
is sounds a little cynical when you spell it out. But the truth
Mm,
is it's kind of like identifying what the best iteration is. Because what I heard you describe about when I was saying, "Hey, it's a shame we don't have even more water stuff," is well,
right.
we want to be sure we're iterating properly
Hmm.
because you know when you're making something that there's some uncertainty, and the question is how much uncertainty are you willing to bite off in exchange for whatever the vision is. And I hear that
Right.
you've made sort of you and the team made a uh, a cautious but still confident choice to say we're doing this continent that's going to have all this water with this new mechanic, but we're going to not really force people into the water for the most part and just let them
Right.
kind of get used to it, like dip their toes in metaphorically.
For sure. Yeah, it had to be interesting. Like the water had to be compelling enough that there would be some desire to interact with it. And
Hmm.
I think, like in my opinion, based on the just the play that I've seen and like the feedback that I see from the community, obviously there is an interest right now. It does create like a new dynamic when it comes to vehicles in particular. Less so the infantry; it's more just cumbersome.
Hmm.
Um, but
And the vehicle
yeah, like
interactions
that.
are fun. If you're infantry underwater, it feels like a mistake.
It does a little bit. Yeah, it's what it is. It's a
Like,
good
oh
reason
god,
to
how did
jump
I
off
get
a
here?
bridge and
Yeah,
then redeploy. Um,
yeah,
you know,
sure,
like
yeah.
without hitting the ground. And but that's just another facet of the continent. Like where if we were just like don't really think people are going to interact with the water enough, like we would have not gone with Osher, right? We would have created X other continent,
Sure.
or just something with more land.
Hmm.
And that would have totally been fine too. But we were confident in with the direction that we were going to launch with,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
where like, okay, well, this is the foundation is still interesting. People are still going to get excited, and we can build on it afterwards. And come 2022,
Hmm.
like that's where the and comes in. So
Hmm. Sure.
it's
Sure.
a decent place to be. Iteration, in my opinion, is way better than going all in and then seeing a failure.
Mm.
I mean, it's hard to argue.
And for you and the team, or is it something you feel like you've always tried to do?
Oh, I say always tried to do,
Mm.
but there has also been plenty of times where we had wanted to follow up and then never been able to achieve that.
Mm.
So NSO is a good example of like, okay, we put out this new faction back in 2018 or whatever it was. Man, time is a blur. And then meant to iterate on it.
Mhm.
That didn't happen, for it, and then we just did like a massive update here in 20 last year. Oh my
2021 was
goodness.
last year.
Yep. And ideally, that's not how it would have happened.
Mhm.
Um, but that's what comes down to like resource constraints.
Mhm.
You know, actually, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
ideally, iteration would be better, right? Just that the constant improvement, and I
Yeah.
think that's the direction that we should go. And I think that we've been getting much better about it lately. I mean, all of 2021 was about like revisiting some older systems and trying to like plug the holes or
Mhm.
just shore up the cracked foundation. 2022 is still going to be about um, like polish the game and kind of like solidifying it. There's a lot of loose threads that need to be kind of like tied together, and I'm sure that'll continue to be the case into some distant future, because that's kind of just the way of things sometimes. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard
finding
you
a
talk about some of the things that went in 2020, like look revisiting some of our old previous conversations,
hmm,
like the mission system, the campaign system, um, some of the stuff, outfit wars, right? The initial iterations. It's like we're getting in really important systems that are needed, that are going to be the things that are the structure that the content is within
right.
in the future. That's I seems like it's the only way to do things, doesn't it?
So 2020, yeah, like you said, well, campaigns came out toward the end of the year, and then the mission system along with that.
Hmm.
It's yeah, building blocks. I feel like PlanetSide 2 has only had enough foundation in the past. So like you're talking about maybe 2019 and prior,
Hmm.
um, has only had enough foundation to support itself as a game that would have had to remain what it is. Um, it's a poor way
So in order
of
to
putting
do
it.
bigger and better things, you need to shore up the foundation. You need to expand the
Right.
foundation a bit, and that's
Mhm.
what those kinds of systems do.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
my like view over the course of is over the course of multiple years.
Hmm.
So again, 2020, implement the building blocks. 2021, shore up the cracked foundations. 2022, polish. Because now that we have missions, now that we have campaigns, we can do cool things.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's a little bit more than we expect. So campaigns, we we had great ambitions. Shattered Warp Gate, awesome. Made a bunch of mistakes, not so awesome. Invested so much time, not awesome. Like
How
trying
how hard
to
was
get our
it?
end result. It was very difficult.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so like in just the beginning of 2021, that was a problem for
Hmm.
us. Containment site release, and then like so PS4 as an example still doesn't have like we had to turn off Esmir, hit unnecessary or
Oof.
foreseen roadblocks with the hardware constraints on that platform in particular, and spent a lot of time trying to fix it.
Mm.
Uh, Things like Outfit Wars was another like building block that we didn't get enough iteration on, and it just requires a big commitment. Like okay, well, we had to run a season,
Yeah.
and the mistakes of that season are just going to be there for the next X
Yeah.
amount of weeks, until the season's
Yeah.
done.
I want to get back to that, but I'm really
Okay, we'll get back
interested
to that.
in campaign stuff and what the
Mm,
lessons learned were. Because when you and I talked, I can't remember if the Shadow Warp Gate had come out or if it was forthcoming. I think it was forthcoming still, and I was
yeah.
pretty excited about things like Sanctuary. I was pretty
Mm,
excited about seeing some mission and lore stuff because I am an old school MMO guy. Um, I like the virtual world aspect of these experiences. I know a lot of people just want to get in and frag, and I respect that too. But a lot of people, and I think especially people who maybe aren't part of the conversation all the time, really resonate with that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to get your pulse check on like how you think campaigns are going. The
Mm.
Distant Shores campaign seems like a long distance away from Shattered Warpgate in terms of what it had us doing, and in terms of the level of polish. Um, all in a pretty good way. I particularly like the way that it took us through trying to get familiarized with some of these new vehicle types, like the Deliverer prototype, the Lodestar prototype, some of these new mechanics, do things in the water. Um, I think that that's a pretty good, a cool way to use those campaigns. And you were, I think, watching my stream when I was going through the experience of the underground base.
I
I don't
saw
know
you
if you
struggle
saw,
with the door.
you saw me getting
Um,
corpse camped. You saw me getting slaughtered by the TR Max camping the top of the thing.
yeah.
Did you expect people to do that, by the way?
Yeah, it was inevitable. Hopefully, it's like one of those things where it's just like, well, this could be interesting. Hopefully, it'll get people to band together to then
Uh
go
huh.
down as a group to
Uh
complete the
huh.
campaign. Realistically, what happens is like I'm gonna post on Reddit. Just
Yeah.
that's the gist of it.
Those things are so
Way less
interesting.
friction to do that than to actually play the game together. Um,
Oh my god! Like I feel like those moments are. It's funny because there are moments when I'm getting mowed down, life where I feel like this is a bad design. This is a fuck up.
mm,
Like this is terrible. How could anyone do this? Think it was a good idea. And then there are moments where I'm like, oh, we overcame it. Like we got it done. Me and this ragtag bunch of people. Like there's even cross faction. I think collaboration to get it done if I remember
mm.
right. And when I actually got through the hallway and I see Ford the Max, I was like, yes, yes. I was so pumped. I was, oh man,
Yeah,
evidently that was more viscerally ready to come out than I expected.
well,
But
that's an MMO moment,
it was a
right?
moment.
Like that's an MMO like social,
Yeah.
moment. Like that's what MMOs do. Like that do best, I think, is create those, very like codependent is not the great word, but like, just fostering that social interaction. And
Hmm.
a lot of times it comes from adversity, or it comes from stuff that's just unexpected. Like World of Warcraft, if we're getting do you remember, way back in vanilla and just like raiding crossroads,
Of
like
course.
there's no real reason to do that. Or if you're the rogue who's just like camping crossroads and just like killing, new players. I'm
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
guilty of it, and then it's just like eventually people are going to hunt you down,
Uh huh.
and then kick you out. And like, but that's part of the fun. Like, yeah, it's
Hmm.
kind of, sometimes a little bit crappy, especially to be on the receiving end, but it's, as long as it's not crappy every time,
Hmm.
as long as there's it's a novel experience
Hmm.
versus one that is just hammering at you every day, then there's some value in that.
Hmm.
um totally depends on what you're interested in as far as like being a player of the game. And PlanetSide 2 is a interesting melting pot because we have such a spectrum of different types of archetypes of players.
Right.
um but campaigns were meant to kind of cater to the people who are hopefully more social, and hopefully more interested in the non, well, uh, interested in something that lives outside of the normal experience,
Yeah.
or just the moment to moment.
Yeah. Yeah. In the parts of the experience that make it feel like a real, like a world,
Mm.
like a virtual world in that sense, place where you go to be rather than, uh, you know, uh, rather than a site that you aim down,
Yeah.
which is not a bad thing either. But it's just, yeah, yeah. Well, I found it to be that way. I'm sure a lot of other people did too. And you were, I think, watching as I went into the back, and I saw that Planet Side 2's very first door, which is very exciting. Very, very exciting to see a door in Planet Side 2.
Just
By the
ugh.
way, I remember how shitty doors were in Planet Side 1, so I'm completely sympathetic with the fact that there are no doors in this game. They were terrible. People are always shooting through them. You would hack a door, go to walk through, and then it wouldn't open all the time. Uh, but it was very exciting to go through a door, and there was a mini moment. I think a mini moment where it felt like a little bit like a sci-fi RPG, like a Mass
Mm.
Effect, or like a, I don't know, what other Prey or something like that. and that was a neat little
Interesting.
moment.
We had a conversation about that door.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh no, and on the dev team.
Oh.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out like okay, well they're gonna have to come down here for this part of the campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and like okay, well maybe it should be a shield. Yeah, well if it's a shield, people just like dip the toe, like they'll just do the back and forth thing and kind of just
Mm.
camp, and not you won't be able to deal with them until they're like on that part of the campaign, and then can go through the shield. Like okay, well it can't be a shield. Well, maybe it's a door that like lifts up, and it's like okay, well if we do that, turn it into an NPC, give it some Lua or scripting that allows it to lift. Like how are you going to prevent people from who aren't on that part of the campaign from just going
Mm-hmm.
down there?
Mm-hmm.
It's like oh okay, well can't do that. Well let's make it like an interact that you can kind of like move through the doors. Like well it kind of breaks the immersion, and it's like maybe it does like, but like at the same time there's other, I don't know, it's sort of like I kind of expect that level of jank almost, and also this
Yeah.
happens in other RPGs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah. Each room
amusing.
is like a different thing you teleport into, and out of the door is just like a portal you
Right,
go through.
exactly.
It's a familiar
Yeah,
convention. You don't need to see
I
the
think so
thing crack open and walk through.
yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. So yeah, that's cool to hear that about the conversation happening on your side about what it could be. Um, you think you'll make another door in the future?
I would definitely. Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to commit to anything because
This is the real shit
but
right here.
I think it would be really cool to do doors that are NPCs that open and close and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
It's totally reasonable. Downside of doing it that way, however, is that you can't do it on just the client. Like if the player approaches it and the door lifts for them, because then the
Right.
the people on the other side have the same sort of issue where like when somebody pops out of a turret and then they don't appear for a second, and then
Yep.
you get blasted and whatever. Yeah, so you don't want that experience. If you run it just on the server, then then it's synced between players for the most part, but then it adheres to like the server performance at the time. And you've seen
Mhm.
orbital strikes take many seconds to go off during times of high latency. Can you
Mhm.
imagine just like waiting there for a door to like you just don't know when it's going to open? I mean, it could be amusing, but also just could suck. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of considerations when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I'll be very excited for what doors open for us in the planet-side
Okay.
future. So I'll be staying tuned for that. Yeah. So future of campaigns. I guess we can plan to see more of this. Is this working in your opinion?
So when it comes to campaigns, there's a number of things that have changed over time.
Okay.
Um, like the first is just during when we first released Shattered Warpgate, campaign came out, chapter one came out, had a lot of developmental effort put into it. We like immediately realized that that's unsustainable. Like it takes too much time and effort to actually get a campaign that is like super fleshed out
Mhm.
and has like all the bells and whistles that we want. And we had to make a lot of compromises, and it kept making compromises that like with each subsequent chapter.
Mhm.
Um, because in order for the campaign system to continue to be something that like is worth doing for us, return on investment wise, we have to reduce the amount of overhead to make the campaign work. So we've been like trying to figure out ways to where like, well, I say try to figure out ways, but also trying to figure out like what the community wants.
Mhm.
Community, when Shadow Warpgate first came out, created a lot of cool interactions up the northeast in the Shadow Warpgate area,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that all of that was fueled by, I mean, despite the lamenting over like carrots and that sort of thing, that was because of the carrots, right? Like that people were having those like really cool fights with one another is because everybody had sort of an objective
Uh-huh.
up in that place,
My
and there was
carrot.
also right, and there was also personal incentive, which is a really strong motivator, because you had to complete the step if you wanted to progress the campaign and then like, get the cool thing that we put at the end. So at some point, players are going to go up there, and then when it's the first weekend and everybody's doing it, yeah, you see
Yeah.
that really cool experience. But then
Yeah.
tapers off, and then it becomes whatever. When it came to these smaller sort of like story based elements of the campaign, I feel like we had to make some compromises there too.
Mhm.
So sometimes just like running around talking to people is you can't keep track of the story when people are shooting at you.
Yep.
So, and just even the sheer amount of reading in general is still currently, I feel like, probably too much
Hmm.
for people to, yeah, it's just there's a lot going on. So we've kind of started to put NPCs in areas where you're probably like some of the things that we learned too is like don't send people back to Sanctuary every single time you complete a major objective. Just do it on the continent. Like they're down
Yeah.
there, they're playing the game. Just like update
Yeah.
them, kick them to the next mission.
Saw that
Like
with
those
Osher.
sorts of things.
Hmm.
Right. Were a lot of lessons that we kind of learned over time. Subtle things that maybe people won't uh, like visually appreciate, but it will make their experience less frustrating overall. So we've gotten a lot of that down. I feel like we definitely need to find a better way to inject story uh, into a campaign so that the people who are interested in lore are able to digest it, and they're able to feel as if they have some sort of connection to the experience. Because right now
Hmm.
it's with our most recent campaign, it was definitely very like go here, do this, talk to this person, talk to this person. It was just like a lot of fetch questy stuff, which I think is fine to some degree. But we like intentionally gear that experience toward like, okay, well, let's just teach them about OSHR, or let's
Right.
teach them about using the different types of vehicles. Let's teach them about water mechanics. So the first thing is just like, okay, jump in the water is
Yeah.
one of the first missions of chapter 2, right? Go down there, do the thing, and then just so we're using it this campaign more as a teaching tool rather than a way to really like hammer on a super um, like an involved story. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that there's a little bit of learning that we can do to find a better balance. So this year we're going to try to implement a codex system that has just
Mm.
a bunch of information, mostly on like game mechanics and Empire
Hmm.
specific lore and that sort of thing, but also gives us the opportunity to invest more heavily in the lore side of things too for the players who are more interested in that. So like maybe
Hmm.
when you complete a mission, like it unlocks codex entry in your you know uh, codex so that you can go back and read it later, kind of at your leisure. Uh, yeah.
Cool.
So there's yeah,
I
it's,
like
it's all
that.
it's all very nuanced as far as like what we're actually learning from the experience, but we are learning things.
No, I am noticing that. Just from playing this campaign, I noticed that. I also had to blitz through the one prior to it because
Mm.
I wasn't playing PlanetSide when it came out. Um, and that was cool too. I like the idea of a codex. I gotta throw a word in there for my infantry homies though, who see something like the codex and go like, "What are we doing?" So help me make the pitch for the codex because I really like the idea. I can come up with
Mm.
my like defense of it. I like it goes for me. It goes back to like the world, and even if you're not reading the codex yourself, there are creators who are reading the codex and using it to make content. There are
Mhm.
people that you know who maybe don't talk about it, who are going there for that kind of stuff. There are people who are going to make choices to play the game in a certain way because they found a little bit of inspiration in the codex they weren't expecting. Maybe an
Yeah.
engineer character that they connect with. It's like, oh, I just put an ass point on my engineer. I've always wanted to try LMG engineer to see what that feels like.
Yeah.
And it's these little bits of inspiration and connectivity that leads you into opening doors you wouldn't expect, and sometimes not even consciously. And it all comes from aping the complexity of the actual world around us, where not everything that's around us is immediately relevant to us all the time. And that's okay.
Yeah. I think that last sentence is really kind of key. So the codex system, like it shouldn't be for everyone. If you've been playing this game for years, like, and you have a certain style of gameplay, like maybe you don't care about lore, but
Hmm.
it's not for you if that's the case, right?
Hmm.
The I think anytime that we create features, we can't, or like we're either gearing them toward a certain audience, but certainly not toward everybody. We'll try to make things relevant to the game, kind of as a whole. But again, our archetypes are just so scattered, and people are so invested in their specific styles of play
Right.
that not everything is going to appeal to everyone. Um, For the codex in particular, there's a few benefits I feel like that are immediate. First of which is when it comes to new players, people learn in different ways. Like the tutorial, whether it's good or bad or what have you is, can be debated, but the people who run through the tutorial aren't necessarily going to be like, not everybody's going to receive the same sort of learnings from that.
Sure.
Some people will just run through it. They just either won't hear, either won't care, or will wander around and just totally not pay attention. But something that they might be might be more amenable to is, I'm probably not using that word right, is going into their the navigation. Maybe they just like to kind of like tinker around and see things, and then they could stumble upon the codex and kind of just do reading. I certainly did in Mass Effect when I was done with the game. Like, I just like, what else is going on, and just when I had some downtime, I was kind of just like, exploring, right,
poking at stuff, being in the world,
right. And so when it comes to new player experience in general, just giving more avenues for learning is ultimately, it can't do us any harm. So why not? There's no silver bullet to solve it. So let's just try to give people more tools and hope that one of them resonates with somebody. So that's one. The next is lore in general. Like we said with the campaigns and that sort of thing, just being able to have that stuff somewhere that's readily available is good. Like, who are the factions? VS is purple and also spandex. But outside of that, like, what else matters?
What else you got? Yeah.
Exactly. So having like a timeline too would be cool that lives in game. Plenty of the lore lives outside. We have articles and articles that are on the PlanetSide 2 webpage and that sort of thing. Just short stories that have been released in that vein. But if we can bring some of that into the game, people might just think like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I didn't know that. Like, again, like, in Mass Effect, when you're learning about the fact that Asari can't have, or like, just how they mate. Okay, that's a really weird, very specific thing that I just brought up, but like, that's something that right.
Proper gamer here. Let's go.
I'm just in it for the waifus. But the just those sorts of aspects are, some things are just easier to digest when you're just chilling. And you're just able to read outside of a combat zone. So hopefully there's some benefits,
like a lower tempo, like a slower tempo, something that you can't have when you're in the middle of PvP.
Right. And Sanctuary has kind of given us that's the low tempo social zone, just in general, right? So like, while you're there, and while you're waiting in queue for something, it's like, give it a look. See what's what. If you got a little blinking indicator, it says like, oh, you got a new codex entry or whatever, maybe you find that interesting.
I like to see Sanctuary getting filled out over time.
Me too.
It's been cool to watch.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll do more with it.
I've actually, when I've been streaming lately, I find myself deliberately walking to the missions terminal rather than hitting the button on my UI. It's like, be in the world. Be in the world. Walking over to the warp terminal. I discovered the little the terminals that make you join combat, which I didn't realize they were there for a little while.
Well, we just added it in the new player experience update, and then there was some broken stuff, and then we fixed it. But it's, for most people, it's not going to be something that they recognize. But for new players, it is a part of, like, we want you to figure join combat out. Right?
Well, that's what you do when you're a new player, right? You look to see what is around, and that tells you what you can be doing. I think it's cool. Anything else about the future of campaigns and missions?
Well, I mean, I could definitely go on forever, but we don't have forever. So,
don't we, though? Didn't you sign up for a 6-hour-long podcast,
Ro? Based on previous, or based on my track record, oh man, I think how long was ours?
I think it was just over 3.
Yeah.
Just over 3.
Which I'll let you know is too much.
Yeah.
Too much for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's late
It's a
for
long
both of
time
us.
sitting in one spot.
We both have had a
Yeah.
work day before we sat down, so we need to
Mhm.
honor that. But what I actually want to do is take a short break. Um,
Sure.
so everyone, stretch real quick, grab a drink, and we'll be right back. And we're back. I'm Deeg talking with Wrel on the Deeg Podcast. We just talked all about the watery continent of Osher and how PvE and PlanetSide is going with campaigns. But now it's time to move on to very serious competitive business. Now, I need to heap more praise upon you, Wrel, because you've done something that I think it was probably very difficult to do, but that I really appreciate, which is announce on the 2022 roadmap that the future of Outfit Wars is number one, returning, and number two, going to a 1v1 format. I want to ask you, what was the process like for you deciding to transform Outfit Wars from what it was, which was a 1v1v1 classic planet side, kind of one representative from each faction experience, to what you announced in the roadmap with it going to 1v1 and using the Nexus map, which we've been teased by in the past. So I'll yield the floor. What was that like?
So there was definitely like an outcry of, oh, the Alpha War should be 1v1. And that's something that we heard very early. It's just, it wasn't easy to do that. And also wasn't reflective of the PlanetSide experience. So initially, like going into Outfit Wars, we wanted, it to be a 1v1v1, like the base experience, something that, everybody understands. But everybody has the same goal for. So like when you look at, well, I guess I was going to say Server Smash, but I'm pretty sure that's against two factions. But when everybody has the same, so alerts are a better example. When everybody has the same motivation, and every faction knows that the goal is to win the alert, the gameplay is different than just in the sandbox and you're kind of just roaming around doing whatever. Same thing for Outfit Wars. When everybody's in alignment of what the goal should be, then that's when things become competitive.
Yeah.
And being able to, I think, take your outfit into Outfit Wars and fight just, with people that give players an opportunity to practice their skills and then, pit them against just the other rival factions that they would normally see throughout the continent, just, in normal play. But in a localized space where everybody knows what the stakes are, it's a really compelling thought. And I think that the experimentation that we did to get there was all valuable. And also, like, it was just something that needed to be iterated on. Like, we could not have put Outfit Wars out in a 1v1 state to start. Even if that was the best thing, everybody agreed upon it, it wouldn't make sense. Like, the development time was just too much. So like, if we're going to invest, 6 to 8 months trying to start this system from the ground up, with the question being like, okay, what are we actually going to get out of it? Who's going to participate in it? What's the lead up going to be? Can we sustain the reward cadence and that sort of thing? Too many questions that we don't have solid answers to. So putting
and you
it out
felt
in
like the 1v1v1 had a solid answers to most of those questions. We know what we think we can expect from this.
The where I think it falls down, and I think many people will agree with me, is just the scoring, like the format, where people were playing Kingmaker, trying to, like, because the objective wasn't to win, it was not to lose or to make somebody else lose, right? So that you can get second place at the very least. So it's a little bit problematic. One thing that, like, I think that there are ways that you can manipulate the scoring so that it's more. So, like, you could always do like a comeback mechanic where the underdog is, or like whoever has the most points is should be the focus of your attention.
A go for broke mechanic, something like that.
Yeah, you could do stuff like that, and then I think it would work. I think that we could potentially, with enough iteration, solve the problems. But I don't know if the community would be willing to tolerate that much iteration. So that there's like a question too. People obviously have an excitement for Outfit Wars. They want it. You saw it in earlier in was it this past year? We did Outfit Wars. It caused a lot of drama. We made a lot of improvements, and actually even made some improvements to the system after Outfit Wars Alpha Cycle 3 was over. We made some improvements to like how rosters work and that sort of thing that you guys haven't seen yet. We made them, didn't touch Outfit Wars again because we had other stuff that we're doing for the rest of the year. So
no more accidental signups.
Right. Yeah. Like that sort of thing. I think that one was that actually resolved prior to no, but we have it resolved now.
Okay,
So at the very least, so that
sure.
sort of thing.
Well, that was the first time we saw the tournament bracket system,
Right.
right?
Yep.
That was a big test of
So
that.
yeah, there was a lot going on in the first quarter of this year, and a lot of learning that we did, a lot of improvements that we've already made. But when we go into the summer of this year, like we could have said, like, okay, we're bringing Outfit Wars back. The format's going to be a little bit different. Still going to be 3v3, and here's how the scoring is going to work, and that would have been something. But the more concrete bet, now that we've done integration, now that we kind of have a better understanding and technology for dealing with these. So NSO obviously it's a faction that floats between different factions, and now we have the
Right.
ability to align yourself and that sort of thing.
Mm.
Um, Now that that sort of stuff is kind of in play, it's solidified. We've made the decision to move NSO into a permanent faction. Instead of being their own thing, that will give them the ability to participate in outfit wars.
Oh, cool.
All these sorts of things that are kind of right, like leading up to something greater. So now we're in a good place to say, like, okay, do we want to bet on a 1v1v1 system that we could probably get it right with iteration, or do we want to get or go with something that we now have the technology for, we already have a map for, uh, and is something that is also desirable, and then just removes the problem
Yeah.
of people playing Kingmaker, just the inherent like social stuff that we
Yeah.
need to come up with gameplay mechanics to work around, which is always a weird place to be. Like it
Mm.
trying to manipulate behavior in a social based game for the sake of gameplay, very difficult to do,
Yeah.
and would vary server to server as well. When people are playing Outfit Wars in the 1v1v1 format, and we're just like doing it in the way that we intended, very sportsmanlike, everybody's trying to
Everyone's
win.
playing to
It
win.
was great.
Mhm.
Yeah. And when everybody was playing to win, amazing.
Mhm.
So much fun to be had.
Yeah.
Uh, but when you do something that's just a little bit askew, and the
And
gameplay
then
honestly
and
supports that
then
behavior,
monkey see,
then
monkey do. People start to learn that that's
right.
a way to play, and
Yeah.
also
No, and
sprinkle into that the kinks of the tournament bracket and
mhm.
signing up,
Yeah.
and there ends up being this community story that just eats the thing. And
Mm.
despite the fact that if you look at it in terms of like participation, look at it in terms of like viewership on social media, it was a real moment for the game.
Yep.
There's actually a lot of like bitter fumes that seem to come out the backside on the community side. And maybe I'm overstating that because I'm seeing it from the community side, but I imagine that there was a solid incentive to try to make sure that that kind of thing wouldn't happen again.
Right. Yeah, it's just not. Yeah, it comes back to like part of the safer sort of path was, let's just eliminate the potential for that drama. I'm sure new stuff will come up.
Yeah.
um, but if we can, let's just get it solid. We know that it works now. We have the technology. We can definitely pull this off. Yeah, it'll take work to do that, and once it's set up, we'll have, it'll be like a building block that we know is concrete,
Yeah.
or whatever good buildings are made out of. Nowadays.
Well, you
But
still say concrete. That's fine.
right. Uh, yeah. So that's yeah. A lot of the impetus behind that decision was centered on not the well, yeah, in some degree, the community drama is just like we don't have the overhead to deal with it either.
Yeah.
If we were
Yeah, the
to
fact
come
that you
down
had
to
to
it,
come out and say a letter to the community,
it was so much.
and
Yeah.
and then that's out there forever now.
Yep.
Um, like that's not a place you want to be. So,
Right.
and the overhead is something I really appreciate. I've heard you said a couple times, like we need to be very cognizant of the effort to these things we want to do. If we have something like a codex, like a mission, like an outfit wars, like based on what we think it's going to do for the game, we know about what kind of effort it should take. Um, And if it starts to overflow, then suddenly it becomes a problem and things get delayed and things get pushed. And
Yeah.
your ability to move on and do the next great thing is compromised. And that sucks, especially when you got a roadmap.
Yes. this is going to be
Yeah.
the year where no PC updates get delayed.
Oh no, he said it.
I'm just kidding. Totally a potential for delay. Totally a potential for things to change. Totally the whatever disclaimer. But it's funny. Like I very consciously went into it. Was like, can't have a repeat of last year. Like we gotta, I don't want to
Mm,
push an update back for multiple months. Like it's not fun to do that. It's also problematic because
mhm.
marketing doesn't have enough time to like put out the social media beats to get everybody like understanding of what's next. It just makes it more difficult to plan from that perspective.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, if something gets pushed back, then a cascading effect that pushes other things back.
Right.
So this year's roadmap, very, very intentional. I think we've done more pre-planning this year than we have in any year prior, at least that I've been on the team.
Mhm.
So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling optimistic about it. Hopefully, don't crush anybody's dreams, including my own. But we'll see. You never know. There's
I'm
always room for
excited about it.
disappointment.
Yeah, I think that the decision to put out a roadmap is like interesting in and of itself. It says something. I pay attention to a lot of other games, and one of the ones I'm most plugged into is one called Guild Wars 2. I think I've mentioned to you before, but um, they went through a period from 2019 to 2021 where things are pretty quiet communication wise from them. It wasn't really too sure what was going on with the game. They were still making content, but it wasn't too sure what the future trajectory of the game was going to look like, what people could expect from quarter to quarter. And they came back last year and they said, okay, we have an expansion coming, but what you don't know is that we got a bunch of other things going too. And here's what you can expect. And they said, the communication is worth the risk, is what they said. I thought that was so interesting and telling because it points out the fact that communication is a risk.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that
I
that is something that you are highly cognizant of.
so I don't know how I feel about that particular statement. Uh,
Ooh,
yeah.
tell me.
So we've kind of so last year things were. So if you look at the end of 2020, Andy Seitz on stream, myself, we're going through what 2021 is going to bring.
Hmm.
Lay out some things, the NSO, like, because we knew that these were things that we wanted to do. We knew
Hmm.
that these things were like things that we could do with the current team that we have, but it's still very loose. Like we didn't, give dates. We just kind of gave some general uh, some general direction because putting out a roadmap, very risky thing to do. Things change, uh, and whether or not it's worth the risk is something that I've been trying to figure out because when you if the team changes, we had a departure at the start of this year or at the start
Hmm.
of last year, right? Andy, and then our tech director and just some
Yeah,
things
big
were
losses.
a little bit tumultuous,
Hmm.
and the games industry in general very tumultuous. So it took all of 2021, I feel, to gain like a uh, to sort of like settle in, to like understand these are the team's capabilities. These are their desires. Just like just want to make sure that they feel like they're growing professionally, or they feel like what they're working on is has value and that they feel good about it and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
And just kind of take like a general like sense of the team.
meeting
And
the creative and long term needs of the people who are actually making the game. Very
exactly, because
important.
that's all very important, and like that is opaque to most to the
Yeah.
players. The players just see the game, they just see the updates and that sort of thing. So when you say like, "Hey, we're going to do this thing," and then players don't see that manifest, they don't care about the reasons for it
Mm.
so much as they do about the actual result. Oh, update got pushed back, or like this thing that we promised is not now going to be like, oh, I was super excited about that. Now I'm just angry about it. Um, so it can be very risky, and I think that if you've built up a habit of pushing back updates, which I feel like we have over the past x amount of I mean actually over quite some time, uh, there's a thought that you can get something out the door. But is it exciting? Does it make the community feel confident in what you have then released? Does it make them excited for things that you could release? That's a that is a behavior and a like a community culture that you need to cultivate over time.
Hmm.
And so it's only worth the risk when you are confident enough as a team to be willing to take the setbacks that could be incurred.
Right.
And earlier on, I think that in 2021 in particular, the safer bet for us, or maybe even 2020, was to surprise you. Like
Hmm.
escalation, surprise.
Yeah.
It's the thing that we're doing, right? And that worked well. And some of the subsequent updates, were a surprise. Even Shattered Warpgate, surprise, for the most part. And it was easier to maintain a lack of communication,
Hmm.
and less risky because we didn't know the state of the team. We didn't know the state of the game, or like the community necessarily. We didn't
Sure.
know what escalation, what that tail was going to be. How many people are
Yeah.
going to fall off. Are we going to stagnate? The needs of the company, is that going to change? All these things are just like, these are realities that all game. Well,
There's a lot
I don't
of
want to
moving
like,
environmental conditions happening
right,
while you're
yeah,
making
that
the
are
game made. And when you put out an expectation, you're making a bet that certain
mhm,
conditions are going to stay within certain boundaries, that things
right.
aren't going to move too much.
So the what the community should see, hopefully, in that we are sharing a roadmap, is hopefully my confidence, team's confidence in their ability to deliver something that seems like people are excited about.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, so it's almost more important for us than it is for the community to get this sort of roadmap. At least from
Yeah.
that's my sort of stance on it. Is like,
You're,
we are good now. We feel comfortable now. We know what we did last year and what we were capable of doing. We know the missteps that we made. We understand a little bit more about how we should be scoping updates. We've kind of hit our stride. Hopefully, this translates into what you'll see as a community through
yeah.
2022.
Yeah. It sounds like you're working on fostering a relationship, Rel. It sounds like you're working on building trust.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of interesting parallels, and I've definitely been, I don't know, maybe that's speaking to the part of me that works hard on having good relationships personally. But it's hard. It is hard to be two different, let's say, entities. I don't want to call a corporation a person, but um, out there in the world doing things, suffering setbacks, having unexpected things happen, and try to maintain a certain baseline level of expectation and energy exchange.
Mm,
What are we here for? Why? What can we expect? And how should we participate? All these things are so crazy and difficult to figure out. It's taken me. I've been married for almost a decade now, and I'm still figuring out little truths about how to make things go well. Not because I don't have the best of intentions, and not because there's not enough love in the equation, but because the skill of communicating it and executing on it, and communicating when things change or might go wrong, and finding ways to be kind about everything that happens is difficult. And that's all happening in private. What you're doing is happening in the public eye.
mm.
And that's a whole other level of stakes. Uh, Probably several levels of stakes between what I'm talking about and what you're doing. So,
There's yeah, there's certainly things that I feel, I don't want to project my experience over other game studios, but I'm sure you've seen it in other games as well, where if you don't say what somebody or what a community wants to hear, like that's worse than trying to be transparent sometimes. Where
hmm,
so it's
give me
so
an example.
so communication can be. So if I say that, hey, we're gonna spend this year working on this mechanic that is maybe unfavorable on. So if I say like, oh yeah, no, we're gonna double down on construction because
Ooh.
it really needs a place in the game. It's
Ooh.
got to like whatever. What would you think that the Reddit reaction would be
Oh man.
versus you know so even
Oh
if
man.
it wouldn't matter what the actual truth is, which is the fact that a lot of people like construction,
Yeah. And then it
um,
could be
you know
good for the game.
that it could be good for the game, that there's a lot of potential there, that we should definitely invest in it.
Mhm.
um, if I were to say that, it wouldn't be favorable communication, uh, and that's like a risk that you have to deal with. So sometimes I do feel like it's better to say nothing and then leave the community pleasantly surprised at
Mm.
the results. So if we were working on a construction update in the background, we're not, and then like just hit you with that stuff, it'd be cool. Like, uh, and people would be excited for it. I'm sure there would be a subset of the community that says like, why did they waste time doing this? But as long as we were
Yeah.
also releasing other stuff that you were interested in,
Mhm.
like it maybe wouldn't sting so bad. So it's definitely like communication in general is a very tricky. It's just difficult, and I
Mhm.
feel like is something that does have to be cultivated over time so that you can create a certain type of language, with your community. Maybe not specifically the verbiage, the words, but the things that you're willing to convey should be something that they kind of almost expect to be, um, they should expect to receive. Uh, hmm.
So you
I'm
want
not able
to be
to.
sure that you're understanding the expectations
Right,
of the person, the party you're relating to, and
for
that
sure.
you communicate with those expectations in mind. And for years, construction's been over here. It's been over here. It's doing its own thing. Some people love it, but especially if you're in an outfit that's trying to conquer the map, or if you're an infantry player hopping from base to base to base, you can more or less ignore it. Like my experience of construction before Osher was I tried to ignore it. And I was a little annoyed whenever I felt like I had to deal with it. I was like,
Mm,
oh, like player base, give me a break. Um, Osher has changed my mind by giving us a play space where there's more room for something and shown me something that I didn't know could be before. But so what you've done, at least for people who feel like I do, is you've opened up the relationship, the channel of communication, so that you can talk to me about construction in a way where I can take you more seriously, right?
right.
Whereas if you had said this to me before Osher came out, that you were going to focus on construction this year, there would be a lot of I would have rolled my eyes and said,
Right.
this seems silly to me. And I might still, we're using it as an out there example, for a good
Right.
reason, because it's still a part of the game that um, is it is it's one of the things that I feel like anecdotally, and you can verify this or not, that is the most likely to have people who either uh, do it a lot or zero it all,
Yeah. Yep.
even more so than vehicles, even more so than.
Oh yeah,
Um,
totally.
I mean, I
It's
guess
because the level of friction involved in participating in that versus
yeah,
the level of impact that it has,
yeah,
typically is, yeah, that's sort of the paradigm that you see.
right,
But you're totally right in the way that you're phrasing this. The the play like the relationship that you're cultivating up to that point then
hmm
opens you to, or allows you to communicate with more, authority on the things that you're willing to, or that you're sharing. Like
yeah,
it's easier for you to take a leap of faith if I have a proven track record of,
yeah.
you know, doing
If we
cool
have
things,
some
right?
trust built up,
Exactly.
yeah.
So that's why I think it's tricky. Also, why it's sometimes I don't know how I feel about the Guild Wars statement, but
Hmm.
totally understand the spirit of it. And
So
uh,
so help me
yeah.
understand what about that statement you don't like, which was the communication is a risk. Is it that you
Oh no,
think
no,
that
the communication is, what was it, worth the risk?
that's what they said, it's worth the risk. That's what they
Okay,
said.
yeah. So with that being the case, sometimes it's not.
Right.
Sometimes it's about the surprise. Sometimes it's about the building the track record in the background so that you can't communicate.
Yeah. I sent an email to a client today, and this is a client that we were trying to work through, helping getting us some software implemented for them. We're going to start, like I mentioned, and there's a problem, and there's some problems on their side, and there's some problems on our side. So each of us is responsible for fixing different problems. There's some confusion about what's going on. I really want to get this problem fixed today. I didn't. Ran into some roadblocks. Didn't expect. And so I emailed them and said, "Hey, here's what we're doing, and rather than try to fix the problem, we're just going to spin you up a new instance, and because this problem seems to be localized, so we're going to get the out of local environment, get you a new one. But it's going to take us a little bit of time. Pad out the estimate. Say here's what you can expect." And in my experience, and this is not lecturing, this is seeing if this is something that you also resonate with. The thing that people most want to understand in a relationship, any kind of relationship, whether it's a client relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or gamers, is what can you expect from me, and what is your role in this situation? What should you be doing? That seems to be something that people really, really appreciate. And with the roadmap, you've put out the here's what you can expect from us in a really cool way.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so.
Well, I'm as someone whose job it is to speak on behalf of software companies in front of customers, client facing, managing those expectations is something I deal with every single day. At a different scale, different. It's B2B. It's all happening behind closed doors, but still, contracts are at stake. Client relationships are at stake, and there are some times when you have to communicate, but not say things, right? And I think
Yeah.
that might be the truth that you're sort of getting to, where if you're working on something that is really big and cool, but you think there isn't yet the trust built in order to have that kind of transparency, then there still needs to be some kind of signal, but perhaps not right on the nose, the right amount of communication, the right type of communication.
Right.
And not like
No,
we're just
totally.
getting into fuzzy territory, but communication is a topic that I'm just very passionate about.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what's on the roadmap? Let's see. We talked about the codex. I was really pleased to see looping back and giving some help to the original founding community outfits of the NSO. I was really happy to see that because when
It's
integration,
long overdue.
yeah. So talk about that. Why did this get prioritized?
So ideally, we would have done it last year,
Mm-hmm.
but this is one of those things that, yeah, we had every intention of doing that, and then Cascade. At the same time, we have certain windows where it's like opportune for us to release certain types of updates or just certain size updates. So originally the plan was Osher November, hit it with the anniversary, boom, it's out, it's done. Obviously, it didn't hit until January, right? So that is and same thing for NSO. So it's like we have the expectations, we have the timelines. What do we need to cut so that we can still get the most value from the time that we have?
Yeah.
Oh man, something that
Triage.
no, we just got to triage. So the amount of outfits, and I'm not trying to like marginalize the experience or anything like that, but the amount of people who were affected by that particular issue,
Mm-hmm.
very small group of players. So and I also feel that it is a very dedicated group of players.
Mm-hmm.
So asking them to kind of endure for a little bit seemed like the lesser evil than potentially pushing out an update and saying like no, we have these big plans but they're not going to get done because we need to invest this amount of time or we
Mm-hmm.
need to make cuts in other areas to facilitate this. So it's not it's never a decision made lightly, and I'm glad as well that we're getting to it this year, or even in the first part of the year.
Yeah. So it was tough to put that off. It sounds like.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you
It's one of
knew
those
that.
harsh realities.
Yeah. I remember I actually did a video on this last year when I knew it was going to happen, And I was like, oh, it kind of sucks to have an update that's good for some people, but the people who were the dedicated robots are actually gonna lose something. It's kind of crappy. That like a token gesture would be appropriate, and now you're actually getting to do the real thing, get it restored back, and hopefully, um, I don't know, hopefully it's not too little, too late. I actually don't have any insight into that in those communities, but
I will say that the people who are affected, I still see them playing.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I say them, but there's the leaders and just like high, um, the high ranking players within these outfits do seem to be still engaged with
hmm,
the experience. So hopefully, they're here also when they can kind of fix their or
sure,
get their outfits fixed.
sure,
And just to be clear on what that change is, we are the intention is to allow the entire outfit to align with a like you still have to pick VSNC or TR,
okay,
but right, it's just going to move the whole outfit. That way, you don't need to disband the outfit, which
hmm,
was the initial suggestion. It's like, hey, if you're NSO or NSO original outfit, you can disband, or like you leave the outfit, then you can align yourself to one of the three main factions.
right.
And then anybody who was left in the original outfits that didn't want to disband, you just wait, and then we'll get you sorted. Well,
This is that.
year passes, it's now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You know, we didn't talk about yet is how good the integration update was, other than like this
Mm.
this this little problem. Fleshing out a whole fourth faction. Oh, cool.
Yeah. The impact of that update was actually interesting too because of where it landed in the year. Wasn't actually expecting it to do as well or to get the spike that it did
Mhm.
during the summer. Like so, it landed in July. Typically,
Right.
we don't do a whole lot during the summer months.
Mhm.
Historically, pre-COVID, it was very much like PC players would kind of dip during the summer and then come back
Sure.
uh, in the winter. And I think that maybe played into it a little bit. Just behaviors have kind of changed, as um, just as the climate is what it is.
Yeah.
But also the update it was just very well received. I feel like it was one of our smoothest releases
Mhm.
for an update of that scope as well, which is a testament to the team and their capabilities and that sort of
Mhm.
thing. So yeah, no, I was very very pleased with the results.
Mhm. Me too. Um, I was that is what I remember remarking at, which was the small amount of reports I heard from the community about things being tragically broken.
Mm.
Like, how cool that this came out and smoothly. It's a big thing, and it got in without a huge amount of friction. There was a problem, but the outfit thing, you addressed it proactively. It was identified. People didn't log in to find out that they were screwed. It was messaged ahead of time. There was an opportunity for it to percolate through the community. Um, so that's one of those. I imagine those building blocks you're talking about, which is and you didn't use that word, but this is one of those things I imagine that gives you the confidence to say yes, we can do a roadmap, to know that you can put out releases like that.
For sure. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Let's see what else for the roadmap. Talk about Outfit Wars. Talk about the Codex. What can you tell us anything about the naval vessels you have in mind?
Uh, so it's just one common pool uh,
Okay.
naval vehicle. It will be mainly for Osher.
Uh huh.
We'll obviously need a new method to dispense that vehicle. There's no real docks on Osher.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, let's see. Uh, no.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
We'll learn
and
more.
honestly, like a lot of that design still needs to be fleshed out and stuff too, and we need to like it's. I've done some prototyping even before the update went live, or
Hmm.
the original Osher update. It's like, man, wouldn't both be cool?
Mm,
So it's so playing with things like I know that we are capable, like fully capable of doing it, but it needs to
hmm.
be like properly
Hmm.
designed still, and like everything accounted for,
Hmm.
and all the edge cases. Like we still need to figure things out. So I actually don't have enough information to share with you to where this would be a more amusing
I
conversation.
figured. I figured. I'm just enjoying the like idea of jet skiing around Osher.
Mm.
Especially like maybe put some little jumps in the water. You could jet ski off of
Oh,
them.
that'd be legit.
That would be
Yeah,
cool.
that'd be fun.
Maybe like I don't know if this is too gamey, but like I imagine like little like things you can jump through in the air like hoops, and maybe it gives you like a boost or something. I don't know. Like that,
Mm. We
my
were
mind's going to crazy
working
places.
on. Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's those sorts of things aren't maybe as crazy as you'd think. Like I'd always
Okay.
wanted to make the construction ramp like give you turbo,
Yeah.
just because that would be hilarious, right?
Oh,
Not that it
yes.
really has any game value. It's just like it's fun.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
the same thing for like was thinking about like okay, well maybe there's a different. I guess I keep going back to construction, but like a construction thing that's like a ring or like a goalpost or whatever that you go through, and then there's some sort of supply
Yes.
of whatever. At one point, I was setting up a just for fun, like experimentation, setting up a track like a harasser sort of race alert. Uh, so I can't get people excited about
Oh,
ideas that
races.
I've had back in 2000 what 18 maybe
Yeah.
and but I was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
putting together like alerts just to like hey what could we do, and I wanted like a harasser race to be one. So I was like
Yes.
creating like little spots, and then they would give you turbo as you hit them, so that way
Right.
if you're like in the lead you could just kind of nail it. And yeah, no, it was a very fun experiment. I think that PlanetSide 2 as a sandbox has a lot of tools to do cool things with,
Yeah.
and that's and part of it's just like it's a little bit of a puzzle too. And this is something that really it compels me about PlanetSide 2's design is that you have players who they're not going to play the game the way that you maybe like I could make a cool sort of like aerial anomalies was a good example of an alert that people
Okay.
were very
Also.
excited about to start, and
Yeah.
then they are very into it. It enabled free aircraft and everybody's flying around, and new
Yeah.
players are like getting the opportunity to like learn how to fly for free,
Mm.
um, without the just sort of limitations that vehicles bring in general. And there's a lot of participation, and then it slowly like kind of tapered off. And
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of issues. And then honestly, the second and third iteration also made it worse. They just it was not good for aerial anomalies. But in general, the mini alerts that we saw, they had like the spike of participation is in like, oh, this is very interesting. I enjoy playing this thing, and then it kind of just goes back to the normal standard. Like,
Mm.
okay, well, you know what, territory control, and that's the baseline for the gameplay.
Right.
So it's it's an interesting problem to solve. Like, there's only so much malleability within the player base's behaviors that we can really create interesting changes for long periods of time.
Sure.
So yeah, and that's just something that I've it's fun from a designer perspective because you're dealing with a little bit of psychology, you're dealing with a little bit of
Mhm.
just I
Yeah,
don't
you
know.
want whatever you put into the sandbox to be congenial with what was already there, right?
Right. And it's a difficult ask sometimes when you try to do something that's a little bit off the beaten path. And that's
Mhm.
part of the reason why I'm very excited about how Osher's release went,
Mm.
just because it's because there is so much that's different. Um, and ultimately, I don't think you're going to change the players, though. Was hoping to try a little bit with the changes to the spawn system, obviously, right?
Ooh.
Um, yeah, yeah, but that didn't pan out.
Yeah, man, that
Made the game
small
worse.
system didn't last. Went back to
No.
the pre-patch model just a few days ago, right?
Right. Yeah. On Monday, patch that
Mhm.
out. So the stuttering that you're seeing on Emerald
I did
should
not see
be
it last night when I
resolved
played.
now.
I think it's fixed.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that should be resolved. Yeah. Oof, as a designer, this is such an interesting game. Um,
Mm.
from multiple areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of enjoyed the more sparse spawns of the
Mm,
OSHA release. I felt like it was helping me go back to like that same thing, that same spirit of like, oh, vehicles exist, oh, construction exists. Because
mm,
if I can't just teleport around between my inventory arenas, which is the way I have historically played PlanetSide, then it's like, oh, I gotta like figure out how to get from base to base. And then there's the part of me that's like the PlanetSide 1 boomer and really
mm,
remembers those days of like, okay, if you want to get somewhere, you have to get into a vehicle. Like that is how you get to bases.
Right.
There's no such thing as redeploy, and generally speaking, all the bases are much further apart. You would never want to walk between most of these bases in PlanetSide 1. And something about that created a little bit of pacing that I found enjoyable. And I felt like
Mm.
I get a s I caught catch a little bit of that with Osher, and especially with the more restrictive spawns. But I also respect, that people have an expectation
Mhm.
about where they should be able to play and what the level of friction to get to those spaces looks like. And that's there's a long track record of what people expect there.
Well, so you say that, but that system uh, was only implemented in 2019.
Okay.
Like, and I designed
Spawn
it.
priority, is that what it's called?
Spawn priorities,
Right.
or spawn priority system. Actually, was it 2019? It might have been the year prior. I can't remember.
Right.
But and the intention was to make it was to reduce the pain point of like, oh, you can't, you have to jump in a vehicle and like fly across the map, and then bail. And that's just what we did for the first 7 years of the game.
Mhm.
That I mean, that existed for a long period of time. So as far as like ingrained behaviors,
When you say that
that
existed,
should be the
what do you mean specifically? Do you mean people just
so
say it again?
so that yeah so the system that we kind of reverted to was one that you had during the release of the game. So talking about 2012,
Yeah.
limited spawns. It's kind of sort of there was some changes over time made, but not much. So
Mhm.
the rules were like, oh, you get one facility or one tower spawn, one facility spawn, one
Yeah.
within X lattice links you can spawn.
Very PlanetSide
Uh,
1 old school kind of in terms of
right, and
approach.
that was the case until 2019 or whatever the
Mhm.
spawn priority
Okay.
system came in.
Mhm.
And what I was trying to solve, like with the design, was like, okay, well, a few things. We need to get players to the battle lines, so
Mhm.
that we can create like mostly even fights. We don't want you to be in places where like that are overpopulated and that sort of thing. And then actually, like in that's how the system released. It worked very well for the first week that we put it out, and then the community was like, well, the community had very strong opinions about that sort of gameplay
Gasp.
because but it was interesting because there was a level of convenience in the old system that was kind of overlooked, to where like if I'm at a fight, I don't like, even if I'm overpopulating or like overpopping, I don't want to go somewhere else. I just want to
Mhm.
stay right here and just keep fighting.
Yeah.
So there was this
Push
conversation
down the
about
lane.
right. So there's this conversation within the community that's very, very much like anti-Zerg, right? And
Yes.
Zerg, at least the term back then, wasn't just, oh, there's a bunch of players here, which seems to be how we're kind of contorting this
It's an
definition now.
evolving term.
But it was about like one faction is overpopulated, right? Like you have
Mhm.
80% of TR and they're moving down a lane and they just keep doing that. They're ghost capping. They're not fighting anybody of significance.
They're not getting any real
Uh,
resistance. Yeah.
but that's the sort of behavior that system encouraged.
Mhm.
And what was overlooked in the spawn priority system is just how much people wanted to do that. So there's a little bit of back and forth that went into play over like about, I think, like a month maybe, where the
Yeah.
system got tempered and it was moved. It was made. It was basically like a have your cake and eat it too sort of system, where like if you're in the same fight, it's fine to stay there, keep fighting, whatever. And then when that fight eventually ends, hopefully we're taking you to a different place with evenly populated fights, and
So
just
not
trying
breaking
to
up
spread the
existing
population.
fights, but making sure that when there's movement between hexes, that more spawn options
Right.
open up.
And I think, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I think that system did very well, despite some contrarians within or like contrary notions within the player base at the time.
Okay.
To see it kind of work backwards when there is like, well, okay, so the game got very fast, and that's what I was trying to solve with at the release of Osher.
Yeah, let's play devil's advocate for a second though. What's
Yeah.
bad about it being fast? Why would you try to reduce
Um.
that?
So I say it's fast in a sense that infantry. So playing the game is obviously better than not playing the game, as our some of our friends
Sure, I'll
have
go with
mentioned
it.
before. But so sitting on a spawn screen, not great. However, the friction of sitting on a spawn screen encourages things like logistics. It encourages things like squad play. It encourages things like you looking at the actual map so you deploy to somewhere where there is an actual desire for your presence, opposed
Right.
to playing in the same spot.
It causes you to
So I think that
reevaluate your approach.
exactly. So one of the things that we're seeing, or we were seeing before, is that like medics aren't really capable of reviving before people just redeploy and then deploy back into the same fight. And that's it marginalizes that sort of like team-based cohesion.
Hmm.
So it, in a sense, detracts from some of the elements that make PlanetSide 2 what it is. So finding the proper balance has been something that's been kind of like iterated on over time. I think that the spawn priority system was very close, but it's problematic when it comes to performance as well. It
Yeah,
really is. Uh, it's it's hard to like you can't point to it and say like, okay, this is the source of our troubles, but it's a big nail that's sticking out that needs to get
it's
hammered down.
implicated. Hmm.
Right, for sure. So when you're
Interesting.
talking about like bad hit reg, or when you're talking about like just general performance, like orbital strikes taking forever to come down, like
Hmm.
it's compounded by just the spawn priority system and the way that it's set up. So one of the gambles that I was taking
Hmm.
with kind of moving back to an older system, which was also loosened up a little bit too, to hopefully try to create like a happy medium. It didn't, obviously, because we reverted it, but it was meant to try to slow the gameplay down a little bit, to give people more sense of logistics. Because again, I feel like the game has gotten very fast. That's my hot take. Do with it what you will. But and then also it would have been good for performance were we to have had a
Yeah.
system that people felt
So
comfortable with.
two potential payoffs,
Right.
which
Exactly.
is get back to this certain kind of ground truth, which is maybe a little harder to tap into with
Mm,
spawns being so available, and also
yeah.
just improve everyone's performance, which I think everyone can get behind.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Well, that thing you said you were trying to provoke. I know you feel like the system wasn't successful, but the thing you said you were trying to provoke about getting people to reconsider their approach is exactly what happened to me.
Mm,
Um, and I don't know if I'm not characteristic of the majority or what, but I liked it. Um, I have ADHD. Someone finally told about a year and a half ago, and I started to learn what that meant. And part of it is irritability, right? So die, oh, spawn, 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 spawn. I'm gonna get that guy. And part of it is difficulty in delaying gratification, right? And when you choose to pull a Sunderer, you're delaying gratification. When you choose to go back to the warp gate to get a galaxy, you're delaying gratification. When you decide to
mhm.
build a construction base, you're really deferring gratification. Um, so I personally thought that was pretty cool. And it could just be that I was on one extreme. And for me, reducing that extreme, coming more towards the middle was good.
Mhm.
Maybe that's just what I needed to come towards the middle. And maybe not everyone's the same as me.
I feel like there's definitely I, with enough time and effort, I feel like there's a compromise that exists somewhere. Uh, Doing it with Osher may not have been the right choice,
Mm,
just because there's a lot of variables. We didn't see that sort of like feedback during the playtests, but the
yeah.
playtests are also a totally different experience. Like everybody is, yeah, you have lots of people
How do you
in for
test a
one, and
game
then they're
meant
all
to be played by 1,000 people?
right. Yeah, and then also like when you go to a playtest, you're there for a specific purpose.
Hmm.
Uh, so you're inherently playing the game differently than you would on live. And though we're trying to simulate a sort of live experience, when we pull
Hmm.
in like 600 to 1,000 players,
Hmm.
it their purpose for being there is just a little bit different than people who
Yeah.
are kind of like enjoying their solo time in the sandbox or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this release has shown, help me understand a little bit better um, what the players who want the faster pace side of the game, help me understand what that looks like a little bit better because I was so close to it before, like I didn't see it as clearly. Um,
Hmm.
And I see people just want the access, they want the action. For them, the planet side is sort of a more of an arcade experience, less of
Yeah.
a sim experience, less of an MMO experience. Um, I think it's probably very difficult to manage and please people who want either of those things from the game.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know, I feel like right now, Rel, the best thing for us to move into talking to, based on kind of the flow of the conversation, is to talk to you about these two different ways of playing PlanetSide, these two kinds of modes. Um, I've started in my mind thinking about them as big and little PlanetSide. Let me tell you what I think of when I see that, and I want to ask you about. Um, it's a question of like vision for the game and the
Mm,
people who play it. But I've long observed the cultural rifts that appear within the PlanetSide scene. I'm fascinated by them, and I despair of them. You might have caught me having a podcast with Commander Sirius like a week ago or so, where I sat down and talked to him about a beef that was going on that I thought was kind of needed to be resolved, and it was a shame that it was out there. It bums me out when people sharing the same space for whatever reason can't find a way to play together and be happy to play together, and especially when one side feels like they are not getting what they need. So this big little planet side idea. So big planet side is kind of what I feel like I'm getting back in touch with Osher and that I'm having so much fun with. The part of me that's having fun going back to pull vehicles and maybe make a construction base, and honestly don't look at my stats very much when I'm playing. It's a very different kind of experience and it's kind of liberating. And I feel like I'm starting to understand for the first time players who want to get into a big ball with their buddies and kind of go down a lane. Whereas before I was looked at that and saw, aren't they bored? Don't they know that those prowlers outside the base can't capture the point?
mm,
I didn't get it. But this experience on Osher has helped me get that a little bit better. We referred to earlier as like what the back of the Planet Side 2 box looks like. That's the hero image. Um,
yeah.
all the hero images look like that, and the open field zerging, all stuff that I think players who really enjoy Little Planet Side look at with some disdain. Um, and the Little Planet Side experience, I kind of see as people who have found a way to play and to channel a certain sense of individual mastery into the experience. Um, and the part of the game that seems to go the deepest right now and historically has always been the infantry game. All the different classes with all the different kinds of weapons, different kinds of slots and utilities and equipment. And the fact that historically, infantry have had the simple ground reality of being needed to capture a base, which by definition sort of makes them almost the most important, I think. Um, and that sense that infantry are important to capture bases and the speeding up of gameplay that you talked about, that's maybe accelerated this sense of infantry importance. Maybe I'm speculating here, since the spawn priority system comes in, where it's like the most important thing is to make sure that individual players get to a fight that they're going to enjoy as much as possible. In Little Planet side, it's not really important to take territory, right? The payoffs for Little Planet side are smaller. The atomic size is smaller because they're scaled to the level of the individual. And it's things like, how many kills am I getting before I die? It's things like, am I having a satisfying back and forth in an arena, roughly a base, right? Is this base well designed to insulate me from too much noise, right? The thing about mastery that's most frustrating is when you get really good at something and it doesn't matter because there's too much
Mm,
variance and noise outside of your control that you can't actually deliver on what you're good at. And in that way, I see the worlds of big and little PlanetSide collide. And in a way, I think big PlanetSide players, for the most part, don't really worry too much about the little PlanetSide folks because they don't need the infantry gods to have their fun. And yeah, maybe they get farmed a little too hard sometimes. Maybe. And you hear about that experience. But much more so, I hear from the little PlanetSide folks. And when I say big and little, I'm not talking about importance, by the way. I'm talking about the scale that they are primarily concerned with, the scale of engagement. Um, and what I see is the little PlanetSide folks get very frustrated and discouraged and feel like their efforts are not worthwhile unless they're able to find themselves in experiences that are roughly fair, roughly consistently, most of the time they log in. And I have soaked a lot of the grief from those players, not anywhere near as much as you have, I am sure, but enough that I feel like I really want to understand this problem and try to see what is being done about it. So,
Hmm.
does that model make any fucking sense?
Yes,
Okay.
but I think it's a sliding scale. It's
So it's a
certainly not
spectrum.
black and white.
It's not
Right.
binary.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just at the top, need to clarify that. Like even the infantry sweat lords sometimes aren't infantry sweat lords only. Right.
Mhm.
There's other aspects of the game that they enjoy. So if you look at even some of yeah, just like our dedicated Jaeger players or whatever, like they most likely had come from an outfit that was doing all the Zergen and doing all the combined arms play
Yeah.
prior
I've
to
seen the
that
same thing, by the way.
because
Absolutely.
right. So, and that happens often. So when I imagine sort of that hardcore like infantry experience, those. So a couple of things. When you're thinking about mastery, anybody is able to then like move into that as an option if they so desire. But the game is not structured that way. Like it is not meant for you to play that way. The hardcore infantry scene that you see are players who have taken the box PlanetSide experience and then done something of their own with it. Like they said, like hey, it's just like when we organize scrims on Jaeger or what have you. Like that's an
Mhm.
extreme example of this, but you take it back a notch, bring it to the normal game, and then you're still having those sorts of players like create their infantry fights, or they're just looking for the fights that are just purely infantry. That's not
Yep.
the way that the game was meant to be played. It is okay to play the game that way,
Okay.
but this is not something that probably people want to hear, but
Hmm.
the when it comes to like okay, what is the vision for PlanetSide 2, I don't know if there's ever been a question about that. There's
Okay.
been a question from the players who are playing it, like, oh, they need to pick one direction and move with it. But really, PlanetSide 2 has always been about big combined,
Mhm.
different styles of gameplay. And the players who are questioning, like, like, oh, they need to, focus on this and just like, or so for example, vehicles should be either super strong and really restricted, uh, just like a battlefield game, or they should be, um, or everybody should be able to play in vehicles, or like the vehicles should be, just off in this other corner to do their own thing and shouldn't interfere with
Mhm.
these other
Mhm.
experiences. Like that was never the intention of the game. That's not even, in my opinion, where the game works best. I think that it's nice to have different spheres of influence, and then there's a little bit of overlap. So when you look at just a base in PlanetSide 2, usually a very infantry centric experience toward the middle, unless it's exposed. And some variety is fine too. Like it's okay
Mhm.
to have bases that are out in the open. It's okay to have bases that are underground. Usually, the midfield is where the combined arms is meant to sort of occur, the transition from one base to the next.
Right.
Um, though
Where the domains
with the
cross.
spawn priority system, you're skipping that. You're skipping that part of the experience entirely when you're
Right.
redeploying elsewhere. And again, that's not a behavior that's intended. That's a behavior that is created because of the interests of those specific players, and we just say that it's okay. And then also, it's them discovering the most optimal way to get the best or
So
the
that's
most
a
out of their
bone that you
desired
throw
experience.
to like the little planet side guys, and maybe to some of like the free to players who are
Right.
just don't know like using a vehicle to get somewhere seems like an impossible task when you're just trying to
Hmm.
figure out where to point your gun and shoot.
Hmm. So that's where the middle ground comes in, to where
Okay.
like redeploying to another base, it's okay. It is also a very optimal way to play the game. Should we let you do it all the time? Should we let you do it as quickly as you're doing it? Like these are questions that there are maybe no concrete answers with, but there's a lot of experimentation, and that's like, for example, when we do things to the spawn system, like with the OSHA release, it's the recognition of like maybe we have a problem here for all the reasons that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Can we take a step back and try to find something that bridges both gaps? Because
Right.
at the end of the day, regardless of how the game was meant to be played, we do have this large subset of players who are very interested in this localized infantry experience, just as an example, um, or to a lesser degree, the construction experience.
Yeah.
And if the game is meant to be this sort of melting pot of all-out combat, then like there's no harm in, because one person is not going to play all the things all the time. And in fact, we rely on players having their own niche within the game to create the massive game.
Yeah.
Like we want the vehicle players to be the vehicle players. We want the
Hmm.
infantry players to be the infantry
Hmm.
players, and we also want players who are able to hybridize and do, a little bit of both.
Hmm.
That's what makes this game amazing, is that we
And
can
unique.
support, yeah, all that, we can support all that sort of gameplay. Yeah. So I have strong like opinions when it comes down to, you should never get just like hammered on by aircraft, or you should never just get shelled at by infantry, or like by tanks, or if a tank can see this hallway, then it's just a garbage base, or those really
Yep.
extreme opinions.
Yep.
Because I think it's a balance, for everything, and variety is the most important thing that we can inject into the game, so
Mm.
that these experiences aren't just 100% of the time. And also, if you're having this experience 100% of the time, and that's like a legitimate occurrence, then I think there's probably something wrong with either the people that you're playing with, or the people, or the situations that you're putting yourself in, because the majority of players are having such varied experiences all throughout the game. And that's, it also makes it a little bit difficult to accept these sort of like these stances that players within different, like, I guess, social groups tend to operate on, where like you see some people say like anti-aircraft, or like, like air to ground weapons are too powerful, and
Yeah.
ground to air weapons are like either like, or too powerful, like depending on who you're talking to.
Hmm.
Like when you're a pilot, for example, there's a strong conversation for like, we're getting locked onto all the time, there's nothing we can do about it. uh, but I know
Yeah.
that's not the case, and I see players able to navigate that. I see streamers, or other players who will get very upset that they've died in a certain way, but at the same time are just farming for the rest of the session. It's
Hmm.
like, and so I don't know what creates that hyperbole within those
Mm.
different groups. Maybe it's just our tenure, of like our insistence on playing a certain way, and whenever that's interrupted, maybe that's when we have the problem.
Hmm.
But the game wasn't focused on that, and it's never been
Mm.
focused on that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a strong argument. I'm thinking about it for a second.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, just let me think for a sec.
It's hmm.
Because the truth is, I if I go back to like the for me the most true thing of all, which is my own lived experience, I didn't feel the variety in PlanetSide very strongly before Osher.
Hmm.
Part of that was my fault, obviously. I take responsibility for that. I'm a big proponent of taking responsibility for your own fun. And in fact, I have to stop myself from criticizing people who I feel aren't doing it. Um, I think it's just very hard to make your reality in general. But something about Osher moved me in a direction, and I was surprised to feel the game able to move me because I didn't think I was movable. I felt like I knew the way I wanted to play the game. And that to me and suggested that there are things that can happen within the game to do this to other players too, who maybe feel stuck. I talked to a couple other people who felt like something about that update also unstuck their experience, let them get back in touch with something a little more, a little closer to the root of the tree, you know? And I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in that. And I look at as a PlanetSide 1 boomer, I really hate invoking PlanetSide 1, but it's the game that is the most like PlanetSide 2. So it's the only other thing I really got in my brain. And I see, like in PlanetSide 2, the fact that the bases are so close together. I see things like access to redeploy. I see things like joint combat. And these all message to me, oh, this is a game that is trying to make sure I'm always having action, close gratification. That the way I want to play is more catered to, rather than saying, here's a world where you can have a variety of experiences. It's trying to reduce friction as much as possible. And what I hear you saying, which I understand, and I feel like I agree with, I'm wandering my way through this personally, Rel, so I hope you'll forgive me, is that there are points where friction is good. Friction is good. And that having friction allows things to exist that might not be able to exist otherwise. Um, I don't know where I'm going with this. What I'm mostly trying to do is trying to reconcile the passionate players on different sides who love the game and try to figure out what we as a community can do to help everyone have the experience that they need to have. And I
So I
feel
have
like I'm hearing you say, Rel, that really, if you like the game for a certain thing, maybe you'll get lucky and get it, but that's not what we're making.
that's a maybe a maybe more like solid stance that I'm trying to convey,
Okay.
because I think that there's a place for everything. Like it is a melting pot because of the diversity of options that you do have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one thing that I want to kind of touch on is
Mm-hmm.
who you run with, like as a social group, seems to like drastically impact your not just your personal playstyle, but also your perception of playstyles of others, and then also what your perception of how other people are perceiving the game. Perception, perceiving. But
Yeah.
I was watching a stream from somebody who is a more infantry focused player,
Sure.
and the conversation that they were having in like squad chat was like, oh, if this was changed, Osher wouldn't have had such a like poor reception. I'm like,
Mm.
poor reception? Like who are you talking to? Which echo chamber are you hearing this sort of reverberation from? Because when I look, it is resoundingly different,
Mm.
both in the social media realm, also in playing just the game in general. So I wonder how much you have to cut yourself off from the core experience of everything to that it that you form these sorts of opinions, or these sorts of I wouldn't even say it's an opinion. It becomes a truth when you like echoing it so much, right? um so I think that the way that players can, if they so desire, break themselves out of that experience that they've kind of boxed yourself into, is just to play with other players, or with people who don't necessarily engage in that style of, or the style of gameplay that you're, I don't know, partaking in, or just like different people. We need to see different people, like just different people in general.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the way.
the people who you spend time with become part of you. Like
Yeah.
that's a universal truth I think we can easily understand. We're social beings. And also there's reciprocal quality too. right? Where not only
Mhm.
do we become like the group, but the group becomes more like us. We feed off each other.
Yeah.
And in a game that's old, these groups become pretty solid, well defined, and they have their battle scars.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's very hard sometimes for simple signals of understanding and enjoyment can go across those lines at times because there are so many scars. Um, Maybe my perception of the way that the things break down is flawed here. But I generally speaking, I kind of see I use big planet side and little planet side. I'm because they're reflective of a certain um, uh, complementary modes of being. I think where um, you can think of it as order and chaos almost a little bit. And I'm gonna go a little woo woo here for a second. I'm so sorry. I kind of believe this stuff strongly. If it doesn't go anywhere, I promise I'll stop. Just give me a second to get it out though. Um, but I think that at some fundamental level, there is rooted in the enjoyment of personal mastery a need to resolve the individual, a need to try to understand what makes me different from others, and understanding to order the world around me based on it's a concern with trying to get in touch with yourself. Why else would you be so focused on your agency as an individual? The experience I can have with my mastery. I think that the big planet side ethos mode sort of comes from a desire to get in touch with the world. It comes from a desire to have a belonging. It's a kind of almost social motivation. Um, not to be not to distinguish yourself from the world, but to make yourself more like the world, to be more in sync with the world. And when we talk about like MMO elements of Planet Side, we talk about things like Sanctuary. It really feeds that side where um, people are trying to see themselves in the world, and that you need a world to exist in order for that to happen, to be fleshed out, to be have all these different latching points. But what you need for the resolution of the individual is consistency and the ability for your efforts to matter more. And so I don't see the wants and desires of, I don't like to call them the salty infantry players. That's why I use the word little planet side because I think that that mode is preferred by more than the vocal part of the community might lead us to believe, where they seem like a very unsatisfied, very vocal minority. And there are loud voices out there to be sure. But I actually think that, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're going to school me here. I actually think that those two modes are quite complementary. And as you say, there's a spectrum aspect of it, right? I like both. It's important to me to be okay at the game, right? I don't want to suck. I look at my KD after a session. If it's under 2, I kind of feel stupid, which, to be honest, is most of the time because I'm mostly just streaming for yucks to talk to people. I'm aware of that. It causes me a little bit of psychic pain. But I'm also able to let go of it a little bit because I'm really trying to get in touch with more of what's out there. And the parts of me where I need to resolve myself as an individual comes more from what you and I are doing right now than from shooting a gun in Planet Side 2, even though there's some linkage there. And so I want to question what I feel like I hear coming from you about that this way of engaging is just not what you're supposed to be doing. And I want to see if there's a possibility to establish a way of thinking about those kinds of players that is more looking towards what they bring rather than what harm they cause. Is that possible? Can we do that?
I feel like the way that you're phrasing this is, or framing this, maybe in my breakdown of how I think the game is sort of like,
Okay.
going or who it caters to is maybe like a little bit. Maybe I give you the wrong impression
Maybe.
for some of this stuff. Yeah, because I don't know that like the hardcore, if you want to say Little Planet side, it's fine. I think that's totally reasonable because, like I said, a lot of players, started from the box, the back of the box Planet side, and then went into
Yeah.
their more hardcore infantry minded, style of gameplay. But I don't know that there's harm in that.
Mm.
I think that there is, like, that's where the mastery is, like as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So becoming better, I don't know that everybody needs that. I don't know that everybody wants that. I don't know that that's even like a necessary component of this game. It's just an optional component of this game.
But you don't
Because
see
that's
the
very
back of the
personal.
box as being optional.
No. I think that's the base
Mhm.
experience. So at the end of the day, like you're looking at players who play the game for 8+ years, or 9+ years,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is, and where they started and where they are now is not, like, that's not sustainable. So
Mhm.
like if you, okay, so say I'm a player who gets in 2016,
Okay.
2018, 2000, whatever, just not at the start. My experience, what I desire from the game, is different from what people who have been playing back in 2012 probably desire from the game because of all the scars that you mentioned. They've seen sort of like how the game has evolved. They've been through the ups and downs. They've found out the most meta, just optimal way to play the game, or they maybe are kind of investing their time in like just a different form of gameplay. Like you have outfits who seem to be playing like a totally different game, on some days than other players as well.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
and yeah, but that's
Actually, I think some of those
those are
outfits
actually
are pretty good
good.
example of unifying those modes. By the way,
Mm, yeah,
um, the outfits that really foster a sense of competency
mm,
alongside making sure they're playing together and they're playing the whole game, right? They're using construction to
yeah,
make routers. They're pulling a max when they need a little bit of
right.
oomph. Like they aren't
Yeah,
just
those are
yeah. That I think is
those are the
actually a
people.
really beautiful thing.
Mm.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Those are the people who have kept like the spirit of the game and are
Mm.
playing it, the way that it was like meant to be played from the outset, and haven't fully uh they haven't gone full like to the narrowest point of the Little Planet side,
Hmm.
maybe.
Mhm. The littlest
I don't
planet
know.
side.
The littlest Planet side.
No, I think
I
that
maybe this model doesn't necessarily work. The more that I'm thinking about it, like I like the spirit of it, I think is accurate.
it's entirely
Um,
possible I'm full of shit. In fact, it's in
no,
some
I
sense
don't
it's
think
highly
so.
likely.
No, because I mean, I just think that we're just phrasing it differently. And I'm like, so when I say infantry tryhards, like obviously it's a very like localized, um, punitive term in some respects, or maybe a term of endearment, depending on who's saying it and when. But there's definitely, I don't know. I think it's more just like a, there's so many different ways to play, and the people who have kind of like narrowed their experience down to like, oh, this is what I enjoy most. This is the most optimal way of playing a game. This is how I can destroy the most new players, or the most, of the least skilled play, the farming, the agriculture
The genocidal
specialists.
maniacs.
Right, like those sorts of players are only that way because of the length that they've played. Well, are probably mostly the way that they are now because of just the length in which they played the game for, because they've had the time to or kind of cultivate their own skills and whatever. Where was I going with this? I had a point at the start and now I've lost it.
I do it
It
all the
fell somewhere
time.
in
I do it all the
that
time.
haystack.
No, what
Mm,
we're talking about is like I'm trying to suggest that the Little Planet side guys, the salty infantry players, whatever,
mm,
are like they're kind of like one of the two major modes of I think looking at an experience like Planet Side. And it's true that not every single game has to cater to all parts of this stupid equation I have in my head. Um, but um, I hear maybe what we can do to clarify this, Rel, is to resolve it into like an example. That might be make this a little less frou-frou. Um, and again, I blame myself if it is that way. Maybe we could talk a little bit about resources and nanites specifically.
oh no.
I know, I know. This is a bone of contention that I hear a lot about, um, and it's one that I have. I understand the arguments on. I feel like I understand the arguments on both sides. I'll give you what I think I hear is both those arguments, and then you can tell me what you think. Um, but the argument right now, I think I read a stat somewhere recently, and I don't know if it's true, but it was pretty alarming. Is that it's possible for a two-man crew to pull 25 main battle tanks in 30 minutes by alternating who's pulling. I don't know if that's true, but
Mm,
it speaks to a reality of a high amount of access to vehicles and the kinds of resources that are put behind nanite gates, right? And it seems, and I don't have the personal experience to validate this as a problem. I do feel like I see a lot of the same people, like sitting in a Reaver, sitting in a Prowler, sitting in
mhm.
a whatever their kind of favorite. Uh,
Yeah.
I think I heard them called force multipliers by many is. Um, I mentioned earlier that one of the things that I feel like the Little Planet Side folks um, grind against the most is the sense of feeling like those kinds of units in the game are a sort of force multiplier on a base unit, like an infantry unit. And
Mhm.
if that's the case, then that, in a sense, suggests that they are superior in some ways. They have
Sure.
additional cost. They're gated, um, and that would also seem to suggest that if it's gated, that it shouldn't be straightforward or uh, oh boy, let me think for a second on how to clearly put this. That you shouldn't be able to stay in that one way of playing all the time unless you were doing something really remarkable. Um, Now that's the like the little planet side kind of point of view. The big planet side point of
Mhm.
view is like this is a sandbox. If I want to play with this toy, why can't I?
Yeah.
It's a three faction game. The winner of the continent is not necessarily the best faction. We all know this. It's fuzzy. And part of what makes it beautiful is that it's fuzzy. And you're here to be part of a world. You're not here to be part of a win condition. So let everyone play how they want to play. I think I hear both sides of that argument and I understand it. I want to see if we can address that a little bit.
Okay. So let's walk through the some of the steps here. This might be a
Okay.
little bit mechanical. So you, as an infantry player,
Yeah.
have infinite respawns. Have there is no cost for your existence, right?
Yes.
You also have the option, the tool set, because we're big on giving players tool sets.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can deal with whatever issue is haunting you,
Hmm.
and especially with teamwork. Like if teamwork trumps everything when it comes to this game in particular.
Hmm.
Now, saying that, well, I don't want to do that, or like I'm not going to pull a max suit because that's
Against my
bad. What bad
ethics.
players do. Right, exactly. My Bushido prohibits me from doing such a thing.
Hmm.
That to me is on you as a player. Now, that's not to say that stance is necessarily wrong. Like I do feel like there's a balance between force multipliers, but I can 100% tell you that if we were to heavily restrict vehicles, the gameplay overall would just be worse for everybody. Like it would be less fun for more people.
I see. So it's like a
Bold statement to
triage
make.
thing, preserving the
Right,
fun for the majority.
right. Because when
And
you like when you're looking around, and I guess this is going to depend on who you roll with too.
yeah,
But if you're when you're playing the just the normal PlanetSide experience, you're not hopping from base to base. You're not QRF all across the map. You're not explicitly avoiding vehicles. What do you see? A lot of vehicles, like open field fights. You see a lot of aircraft. You see a lot of
yeah,
everything. If players just like if that wasn't an enjoyable experience, then players would do it less. Is it only enjoyable because you can farm infantry? I don't think that's true. Like based on just the normal average player's experience. However,
mm,
the veterans player or experience is so heavily skewed toward these pain points being their fun being intruded on. I think that the mentality is just different. The pain points maybe hurt more, but Okay, going back to mechanics. If you, for example, if we were to limit vehicles, the amount of which are on the field, how do you make that still rewarding for the players who pull them without making them more powerful? Because you can certainly
Hmm.
make them more powerful, right? Like you look at battlefield vehicles, and they're pretty they're pretty strong,
That's a pretty normal
uh,
comparison. Is that is
right?
that these resources multipliers should be like a kind of reward, a payoff.
Yeah.
For what? I'm not sure, but it should be a payoff, and you should feel powerful in them.
So if that were the case, if we were to make them more powerful, feel like you are like, yeah, I'm able to, I save up my resources. I'm going to jump into a tank, and then I'm going to farm people in this game because that's what the goal is. Outside of maybe or like maps like Osher, like the experience doesn't necessarily get better there either. You might have more infantry, maybe less vehicles overall on the map. Is that a healthy thing? I think it actually might be the opposite, if I'm being totally honest. Certainly
Mm.
less healthy from the spectacle that's created. Certainly less healthy for the players who join because of the spectacle that is advertised on the box. Uh, less less powerful because of just the image that's even portrayed outwardly. So if you're taking it like really into the like mass appeal or the limited appeal, I guess, of Planetside 2, like what do we convey like as our base experience? Oh, it's massive aircraft vehicles, or like ground vehicles, and then
Yeah,
infantry play,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
all cohesive, right? So asking to kind of eliminate or severely reduce some aspects of that experience, it doesn't. There's no way that this seems like a good idea
Mm.
from just that perspective. So you can make the argument though, like, okay, well, this is the argument that I would make as well, like the new player experience, right? People pop into the game, they just get farmed by whatever, however many hour veteran, or just like a tank sitting up on a hill and that sort of thing, and that's maybe what they are receive as their first experience in the game.
Okay.
They log off, quit, never come back, right? We obviously have retention problems when it comes to just the amount of people who come through the door every day and stick around for 14 plus days.
How many come through
Um,
that door every day?
so it was roughly 1,000 last time I checked. So we still like that's a lot of players for a new
That
for a
feels
free to play
impossible to
game.
me. I can't even
It
imagine
so
that much
to be
churn.
clear, that stat is yeah, it's really bad. So that stat is though new accounts created. Uh,
Mm.
so
Oh,
whether or
so
not that's padded for whatever is going on, there's probably a little bit of play there.
people playing with new
But
accounts, yeah.
even that being the case, like the future of this game is dependent on people coming through the door and then hopefully getting addicted to the experience that they see. Now think
Yeah,
about what your initial experience was
right.
as a player.
Mhm.
And all the people talking about Osher and how it reinvigorated their first moments. Think
Yeah,
about all the people who just in the threads that you see on Reddit, talking about what their first moments were.
right.
Don't you want other players who join the game to have that same sort of feels?
Mhm.
It just from that perspective, uh, there's a bunch of ways to look at this problem, and honestly, there's no clear answers. I do think that
Mm.
there's a balance. I do think that things are overtuned in some respects, but I also think that the game would be better if there were more players willing to jump into vehicles and have that experience. So, catering to small planet side in particular, a very difficult prospect to like embrace. I do think that there's a place for it, obviously,
Yeah,
when it
yeah.
comes to the mastery and the individual experience. Obviously, I enjoy that too. Like I do enjoy being good at the game. Am I good at the game? No, probably not. Slightly above average. I'll take it.
We
But
take our moments.
right. But at the same time, like I don't really have an interest in being like hyper competitive on infantry. That's not the way that my experience went. I
Mhm,
embraced what Planetside was, and I really, really like all that it has to offer.
mhm.
And yeah,
Doesn't
there's no clear answers. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's not clear. I think that's a real ground truth we can establish. I really appreciate what you're saying about the experience of Planet Side that is available and unique, that is the large scale, persistent, multiple kinds of things. Like the sense of you asked me what my first experience with PlanetSide was. I remember it, and it was actually the PlanetSide 1 beta. I was coming out of a tower, on Amarish, the PlanetSide 1 variant of Amarish. I was playing I wanted to play a heavy soldier. It's the reinforced exosuit. So I had like a heavy infantry gun and an anti-vehicle gun in my second slot. Very much like the PS2 Heavy Assault. And I come out of this tower. There's a short hill in front of me, and I hear gunfire on the other side of it. So I walk up to the top of it. I see a Galaxy and a Reaver fly overhead, and all of a sudden our door is getting shelled, and I'm returning fire to some of the infantry on the other side of the hill. That is like that is what this game does that seems unique, and access to that is I hear what is you are zeroing in on as the main distinguishing characteristic of PlanetSide.
Yeah.
And that's what's special. The interesting thing about it is that in order to have that experience, you have to point your cursor with the mouse and shoot. And that is number one, not easy. And that's actually one of the hardest things to do in gaming, I think, is to shoot a gun in an FPS. I think a lot of us are desensitized to that, but it's quite true, I think, especially when someone else is shooting back at you. And because
Can
it's
I
hard.
interject?
Yeah.
So, mentioning that, first person shooter, trying to, especially like fast paced gameplay, players. So slower forms of gameplay are good at helping acclimate players to the game. So when you jump in a tank, or if a new player jumps into some Sunderer and there's just basilisks on the top and they're just thump 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 thump, the fact that they're shooting at things, the fact that they're getting hit markers, just feels good. Like that's where the players are getting their sense of like, oh, this feels good. I like this
I'm having
experience.
an effect. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, and that's
Okay.
the initial, that's one of the reasons, or one of the arguments I guess you could make, versus like, okay, you drop into a fight and then there's, this infantry corridor and then you get, triple tapped by somebody with a, anchor or what have you. And you're going to get that too, I'm sure. But slower forms of gameplay in general will helps players become more acclimated to the game. That's why one of the reasons why there is a construction scene. That's why you have players who they enjoy outfit play. That's why you have players who enjoy shelling spawn rooms. Yes, it seems so inane. Yes, it seems so boring. Yet it's not. It's the reason that some people stick around. Now, we've given you all the tools to go elsewhere, like if you are a veteran player, or to counter these sorts of efforts, or to find friends, hopefully, to help you counter, these, bigger groups of players. And I think that if anything, the onus should be on the veterans to try to make that experience better for themselves. Like, actually, you mentioned it. You're having ownership over your own enjoyment of the game.
Yes.
And we have created so many opportunities for you to do that. It might not be all the time. The game is not set up to have an all the time anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the beauty. Like that's why we've gotten to 10-year anniversary. That's my take. I don't know.
All right. This is good. Thanks for letting me push you on this a little bit. I really appreciate your openness. So I guess that means that we're okay with nanite gain resources being however high it needs to be to let people jump into stuff.
So, it's not to say that there shouldn't be. It's not to say that the balance is perfect, right?
Okay.
Time and place for everything. There's plenty of people who don't use their nanites at all. Why is that happening? I don't know. Just because of Bushido, or because of friction, or because of
I used to only use them on
disinterest in that.
They don't go very fast.
Right. So there's that element as well.
Mhm.
And that's not to say that like, some things just aren't, or like, that's not to say that all the explosions in the game are necessarily healthy for the game. Just as
like
an
area
example.
of effect weapons.
Right. So there are certainly things that aren't probably not super great, like Bastion fleet carriers. We're planning to address some of that next year
In the roadmap.
later this year.
Mm-hmm.
We had it had a great initial push. Everybody was in the spirit, and then as soon as it got optimized, or like, um, or maybe just players didn't want to pursue that sort of friction of like, jumping into an aircraft, needing a bunch of people to help you, swarm a Bastion fleet
Yeah.
carrier to take it
Yeah.
down. That luster went away, and now it's just a farming chariot that, for most of the time
Yeah.
will just cruise across the map, and then the leader just, right clicks on the map, and then you just get a bunch of kills. Like
Mhm.
that sort of experience, yeah, probably not healthy for the game, but that's not the initial experience that was had.
Yeah.
Like, it served its purpose. It just needs to be iterated on, maybe a
Iteration.
little bit faster. Right.
Iteration.
Iteration in
That's the
general is
key.
a yes.
Yeah. I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect that. Can I float a hypothetical by you in this
Sure.
whole realm of like skill expression and stuff? Um, how how bad would this be? Um, oh boy, maybe I don't want to ask this question. It's a little bit of a silly question. Sometimes when I'm trying to understand different sides of dialectic, people who aren't familiar with the term dialectic, it's when two things seem to be true but seem to be opposite of each other. And people who having a game that requires skill to be very good at, but having a game where skill sometimes matters hardly at all is what I consider to be a dialectic.
Hmm.
Um, and I like to try to understand these by pushing them to one extreme or another. And so the one extreme of like the little planet-side dialectic is like purely an arena game, 6v6 infantry. Actually, the community has created this, right? They've had their infantry leagues, planet-side infantry league, farmers league, these kinds of things. And the other side of this, I'm asking myself, what does that extreme look like? And I kind of imagine a game where there's no aiming involved. There's no skill involved at all, really. It's all strategy, right? It's all about spectacle. And I think that probably that would be bad for the game. What I'm trying to we've been talking about balance, right? And for the most part, the balance perspective I'm hearing from you, I feel like, is here's why a focus on the small skill stuff is bad. Um, and here's why a focus on the big, like combined arm stuff, is very good. But I'm trying to find out how far we can push it to the combined arm side before it starts getting bad.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Like,
don't know that it's bad. I know that
well, I brought the
it's
example of not having to
additional.
aim your weapon to shoot people, like having the game
Hmm.
auto aim for you. Like that to me is
Okay.
pushing it very far in that direction. That seems
Gotcha.
obviously
Gotcha.
bad to me. Is there
Okay.
a nearer point that is still bad? I'm just putting this out there.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Like
honestly I don't know how to
like
entertain this particular
one of
question.
the things that people complain about with like max suits, right? Especially anti-infantry max suits,
Mhm.
is that they is the feeling like they lose at the infantry terminal rather than losing when they're out in the field. And there's I think a good place for both those decisions to have impact. And so you put not having to aim your weapon as all the way like on the extreme, not having to shoot to kill, and not having that aim
Mhm.
to kill on the one extreme. But on the other end of the extreme, you put maybe treating all vehicles and construction stuff as like a force multiplier, and people spend most of their time in infantry, stuff like that. Maybe that's an opposite extreme. So we're somewhere between those two extremes. And where does something uh max suits lie? Where does something like Bastions you just mentioned
Yeah.
as a good example, something that's a little too far on the side of the fantasy instead of
Mhm.
having a skillful experience.
Okay. Um, so certainly, I think that some of that conversation probably just needs to be restructured when it comes to the players who are having it. So, like max suits, as an example, yeah, they have a whole bunch of health, also very easy to kill. But the players who have the biggest problem with max suits are usually the ones who aren't equipping C4, or they just don't want to deal with them, because it's just this blip, this interruption of the gameplay experience, or when max suits are just en masse, or rather, they're massed on point. You can't break it unless you do something that you don't want to do, which is pull another max suit, talk to other people, have them pull the max suit. However, you could be phrasing, or you could be interpreting that as like that strategy component of the game
Hmm.
is a skill that needs to be cultivated. Even just the soft skills of having conversations with people to get them motivated to do things. That's maybe not a skill that you are looking to cultivate. However, that is a big component of a social, massively multiplayer online
True.
game.
Big true.
So, right, and it's just a little bit difficult. So, but the opposite. So when you think about like a Bastion Fleet Carrier, for example, right clicking on a map, like you can at this point in the game, you can have a solo outfit. You can grind out the
Yep.
resources. You
Yep.
can, have your own thing. And yes, that's too much power for a single player to have, because you as a singular individual
Hmm.
now takes, well, many, many individuals to then deal with, or I guess a few individuals for a long period of time, to
Either
deal with all the
way,
hard points.
it's a little too much for a little too little effort.
Right, exactly. And finding that balance is something that I think will be debated probably until the end of time. But
It
there
probably
are some
should be.
clearly, yeah, yeah, for sure. But there are some clearly broken examples like the Bastion
Yeah.
Fleet Carrier, or you can make the argument for outfit orbitals or whatever. But
Yeah.
honestly, those are, to me, they're more entertaining than anything else. Like, I
Oh,
died whatever once, or I
triggered.
bounced away from the fight once, or I had to go indoors for half a second.
Yeah,
Oh
it's interesting.
no,
I
yeah.
think like when those things are in the right stage, like
Uh-huh.
you kind of bitch about them in the moment, but then afterwards you look back at it and it's like, it's okay. It was kind of a funny
I think
moment. Or
right.
maybe you sometimes are the one doing it to the other guy. And
Mm,
that's where the sandbox elements feel kind of good. Like it's like today, today me, tomorrow you. Um,
mm,
and for it to be some of that, like for example, to be the guy who pulls the max unit, right? Like maybe a small infantry fight or something like that. Talking about maxes specifically, the complaint that I hear more often from the little planet side guys is um, um, not so much about the fact of the max, but more about like something like mass pulling.
mm,
Something like, especially when maxes are doubling down on sort of an already um, unfair situation, like
yeah.
a bunch of maxes sitting on a point when it's like a 70-30 pop advantage. And maybe those guys are having fun. Maybe they feel like they're geared up in the middle of a war. I don't know. I don't know. And that probably
So,
has some validity. But
mhm,
can we find a way to balance it? Like I've heard suggestions about like, well, what if the resource cost to pull force multipliers within like 2 hexes scaled? I mean, this is a crazy design idea. I
mhm,
apologize. It could be whatever it needs to be. It's just an example of this kind of thinking. Make the cost to do those kinds of things go up as their relevance as they are not needed. If that makes sense. So the
yeah,
less useful a max is, the more it should cost because
sure.
you're
Yeah,
being
you
kind
could
of a
say stuff
dick.
like, if we wanted to take this example, and then totally have people on Reddit run with it, you could, for example, have a separate terminal that's just, used for maxes, and maybe it only comes online when the fights are of a certain scale, right? So any sort of, like, if you get a max to a
Yeah,
small fight, it's usually because you would have then had, like, overcome some sort of friction to get it there in the first place. Like, those sorts of things could be sorts of things. Like,
sure,
they
sure,
could be
sure.
options that could be entertained.
Yeah,
But at the same time, like, you mentioned that sort of, you know, okay, I'm gearing up to defend my base. At the end of the day, the the sort of like, oh, it's a fair fight is a social contract. Like, that's not what the game wants you to do. Game wants you to capture the base and move on, right?
mm,
So some of that needs to be like self-patrolling. But some of, people aren't playing by those rules. They weren't invited to your little 12v12 on gray herring or
mm.
whatever. Uh,
But big devil's
yeah,
advocate, can't you apply that same argument to like Outfit Wars and the fact that it was only 1v1 and like people can it's kind of a social contract. So
yes.
I think you have
However,
a good answer for this, but why is it bad for Outfit Wars to have that, but okay for live Alert Planet side to have that?
so the goals are different. The
Okay.
goal of PlanetSide 2 is structured in such a way that uh, you are looking for personal progression. Like, as a player, you
Yep.
are very, very much incentivized to get certs, get experience, capture the base, defend the base. Those are the goals. But for the veteran players, they're looking for fun fights. I want to fight. Actually, you know what? Honestly, a lot of them are rules for thee and not for me, where like they'll farm all sorts of individuals, and then the moment they get stomped by a maxi, it's like, oh no, this is unfair. And
Wrel throwing
man, I see
shade.
that
Let's
happen
go. Gauntlet
so
thrown.
often. And then you have, but the structure of the sandbox is the same, to where we've already outlined the goals. There's an alert, win the alert. There's a base, capture the base. There's a Sunderer, quite honestly, blow it up. That's sandbox. But for competitive, we want the game to be structured in such a way that you are having a competitive fight. Like that was the goal from the outside. And then people, for their, for the social contracts or whatever, actually, they're looking for ways to undermine the experience that we are looooking to create. So different set of rules. Just to clarify
how
again,
are they trying to undermine? Sorry, I'm not quite sure what that means.
Okay, so just to clarify again, sandbox, fight the players, win the game, capture the bases, win the alert, right? Okay. For outfit wars, win the... Oh, actually, I see where you're going.
See what I'm setting up here?
Yeah. But the goal is competitive. Or I don't even want to use the word competitive. We got raked over the coals for that sort of thing. But the experience was meant to be like a sportsman-like event.
It's a
for
sport.
Players to, like a sport.
The team that's better prepared, that's more skilled, should generally win.
And our perspective of that was, you are playing the game with the intention of winning, not playing the game with the intention of helping somebody else win.
Yeah.
So that's where that kind of fell apart. And that's also why we're moving to a 1v1 format.
Okay.
To avoid just the policing that needs to be done on the social side of things to make sure that players play with one another.
I like this. This makes sense. This is what I was expecting you to say. And it suggests that there is room, there is an interest in finding a experience that more rewards consistency and skill, which is the thing a lot of players want. And Outfit Wars 1v1 is going to be one of those things. It's already a big thing by itself, I feel like. But I'm going to ask the question. Are there more things that you're interested in or that we can look forward to that are in the same vein as moving towards Outfit Wars 1v1 to give more of that the skilled player wins experience?
Yeah, it's totally know where you're moving with this. And in fact, I saw it come up in conversation when you were talking to, I think, Kamikaze, about the, big planet-side, small planet-side. The game should be, maybe smaller or what have you. But I would say you could do such things as long as it's paying credence to the fact that there is a sandbox. One of my big apprehensions about Outfit Wars in general was that it was pulling people from the sandbox.
I think we talked about
to go
that
into the separate mode. And the difficulty with that is that you need players to have fun on, in the main mode of Planetside 2. So the more that we break things off, if we were to do it, I think Capture the Flag would be super fun, right?
Hell yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it would, of course, be, a separate side of the game. It would, detract.
Would pull players away, probably.
So, well, and that's, that we're tiptoeing around areas that I don't want to delve too deeply into.
I get it. Like I'm just talking about like high level interest. We don't need to coalesce it down. I'm not going to try to get you to say something you shouldn't say. But it sounds like that the thing I'm trying to zero in on is that there is an understanding of what those players want, and there is an understanding of what those manifestations could look like, and that right now, alert continental play is not. You don't think that it's a good place for those things, but you think that Outfit Wars could be a good place for those things, and who knows what the future of PlanetSide could look like.
Certainly. And until then, there's always Jaeger. There's always, test server. There's community-run events that can get you closer to that if, that is something that is like, you're kind of wholly devoted to.
Yeah. And just so people know what Wrel's referring to, the Kaga have a Kamikaze, people who don't watch every single minute of my content. like Rel does, apparently. Thank you, Rel, by the way. Big supporter. Um,
I like it.
it is I was putting this crazy idea of how do we make PlanetSide easier to accept for most people? And the easy idea that I had was shrink it down. Shrink it down. Give it to people in smaller bites. Smaller number of players, smaller amount of options. Give people the chance to learn how to play an infantry fight. Give people the chance to go to a place where all you can do is roll around in a tank. That's all anyone's doing. Um, and that does exactly what you said. It pulls people away from the sandbox. The thing about PlanetSide that kind of already hangs together. It's the golden goose, right? And you don't want to kill or starve out the golden goose.
Yeah, it was our initial promise, and we just want to make sure that if we, go that direction and start on, well, yeah, we just don't want to undermine that promise.
Word.
Is all. We
Yeah.
want to respect it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna throw one more Outfit Wars this question at you.
Okay.
So part of the reason I was really relieved about the 1v1 thing, I should have mentioned this before. I totally forgot. I'm sorry. Is because I'm an optimist. I really wanted to love what was made, what the experience was. But after I sat on it for a few months, and I'm very slow. Okay. The thing I came away with is that like the Alpha 3 experience is like you can have the tournament bracket, like, or you can have the 1v1v1. Like it kind of either works, but it's when you put them together that it kind of um it kind of fights each other a little bit. I felt like, and so glad we're going to the 1v1, and it made me think, oh man, I hope Desolation's not dead. Is there any possibility of getting some like exhibition matches going between like some prominent outfits one of these days, like a show match or something like that?
Right. Yeah, show match stuff is definitely where I think the 1v1v1 uh, could still be, integrated.
I would love to see that.
N-
A lot of people would.
Yeah, no plans for it this. I'll say no plans for it this year.
Sure.
Yeah, it's there's already going to be like enough mountains to move when it comes to moving us to like a 1v1 format.
Of course.
That, but it is something that people have mentioned having interest in, and I
Yeah.
think it'd be great if we could just pick a map and say like, okay, you do this on Coultier or what have you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and having that sort of flexibility would be great. It's just tech and UI and everything else kind of excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it makes it a
So
little bit
you
rough.
you also think it's a cool idea, but as with all things, it's a
Mhm.
matter of effort and trade-offs for that effort.
Oh yeah, no, totally. There's no shortage of ideas, about the ambition
Right.
and the potential
This is the
future for
gamer
Planet.
error. We all think we're amazing because we have good ideas. But the truth is, on your side of the aisle, I know a little bit about this because I work in software, but not in games,
Mm,
is that good ideas are easy. The hard
right,
thing is making them go.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And on that note, I want to take another short break, Rel. You cool with that?
Sure.
All right. Back in a few minutes, folks. Be right back. Hello, we're back. Did you miss us, chat? It's me, Deeg, talking to Wrel. We've been going at it for 3 hours. Doesn't feel like more than 15 minutes has gone by, though. Talking about PlanetSide just never gets old, does it, Wrel?
No, I enjoy it. Probably too
Clearly.
much.
Clearly.
Yeah.
When we're gonna wrap this up pretty soon, folks. But and let Rel get some sleep tonight. But I remember I was going through a whole bunch of notes before we talked, as I always do, and I picked out. I think it was a comment. It was either by Cardo or Andy Seitz. I can't remember who it was, about how like people talk about passionate developers, and they're out there. And there's passionate developers, and then there's Rel. And I've heard that from a few different people who've worked for you, that you set a different
Aw.
bar for caring about the thing you're making. And being in the public spotlight you've been in, and getting some of the feedback you do, it seems to me that you have to care. You have to care. Otherwise, why bother talking to someone like me, who's going to drag you through a 2-hour discussion about Big and Little PlanetSide? It takes a lot of love.
Yeah. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, Cardo in particular has definitely said some things that I appreciate. Yeah, and I don't know that I'm worthy of all of that. But I certainly appreciate
We
it.
appreciate you, dude. We appreciate you for your hard work. We appreciate you for showing up. Appreciate you for making yourself available for stuff like this. And I want to especially thank you for wading deep with me on some of this stuff. I know not everyone's going to come away with this feeling like they had their play style or their point of view validated, but I hope that people at least feel like they understand where things are coming from a little bit better. And like we're all a little bit more well connected than we were before. That's the main thing I care about. And if you think that I did a bad job of that, I know you'll let me know. I take that feedback very seriously, just like a guy like Rel does. I know that he listens. I always see Rel stalking random streamers. He's on Reddit threads. Like, he reads all the stuff, and all the good and all the bad. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Man, I should probably stop at some point. I think I'm addicted, but yeah, no. All the feedback, it's taken, and then kind of weighed in the balance of everything.
Yeah.
It's important to do that. Yes, you could take a dump on certain play styles, or me, or whatever. Like, that's totally, I get it. Like, I understand coming at it from the perspective of a player, and especially people who've been playing this game for so long.
Who bring their own kind of passion.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And on that note, let's call it a night, man. This has been good. Anything else you wanna say? Any parting message for the PlanetSide community, the podcast listeners? Anything you want to promote, like a game like PlanetSide? Download PlanetSide 2 now.
Right. Yeah. No, just thank you very much for the conversation. This was actually, I mentioned it to you off stream, but I'm surprised that 3 hours actually went by. Also, you you wrote me into another 3-hour stream again, but this time unbeknownst to me.
I got bad news for you. It's gonna happen again.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, very likely. Yep. But no, appreciate the conversation, of course, and all the topics are insightful, or this discussion regarding these topics. Yeah, I don't know. I think we got really cool stuff lined up for 2022.
Yeah.
And 10-year anniversary. Oh man.
I didn't even ask you about that. I didn't even put you in that position, but I am so curious what we got coming up for the 10-year.
Yeah, I hope that the whole year is good. I'll say that. 10-year is like, it's a great milestone. Don't want to like overhype or oversell, anybody on anything, but yeah, like, we should acknowledge it, and like, celebrate the community, and celebrate just this game's existence, and all the future years to follow.
That's right. Here's to the next 10.
Word.
All right. Thanks, folks. I'm Deeg. This is the Deeg Podcast. I'm everywhere: YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And if you like my stuff, do me a favor, like this thing, maybe subscribe, maybe check me out on Discord or Patreon. Links are going to be somewhere. You can click around to find them. I love all y'all, every planet man and planet woman out there, even the robots too. And love flows all around us, as a certain sappy movie has reminded me every single Christmas. That's all I got. Thanks, Wrel. Thanks, everyone.
So yeah, thanks guys.